The wind on the Llano Estacado had no mercy. It was born somewhere in the west and died somewhere in the east, and everything in between was just a place for it to scour. This was the late 1850s, or maybe the early 1860s, out on the raw edge of the Texas Panhandle and the New Mexico Territory. It was a hard land, a baked and cracked platter of earth that had forgotten what rain tasted like. The drought was in its third year, maybe its fourth, and the buffalo grass was bleached to the color of old bone. Dust was the real currency here. It got in your food, your water, your lungs. It coated everything with a fine red grit. Life was stripped to the bone, same as the grass. You survived. That was the whole of the law. Freight wagons cut deep ruts into the land, lonely ships on a dry ocean, and crews of sweating men strung the new telegraph wire on skinny poles. That wire hummed with messages from a world that felt 1,000 miles away. A world that had soft rain and green trees. Tahan knew this land. He was a man of about 24 or 26 years, a Comanche whose people, the Numunu, had called this land Sukobitu, the center of the world, for generations. He lived on the fringe of that ancestral land. In a small dugout he had reinforced with cottonwood and stone. He was known as Elk Runner, a name given to him for his endurance. He could track a bull elk for 3 days and still be the first to the kill. He had a foot in 3 worlds. He spoke the language of his mother, the flowing words of the Numunu. He spoke the clipped, hard English of the settlers and the rolling Spanish of the vaqueros and traders from the south. His life was a patchwork of skills. He was a hunter first, living off the land that provided just enough. He guided freight wagons through canyons that would swallow strangers. He traded horses, animals he understood better than most men, and he had a careful hand with the springs and hammers of the old flintlock rifles that settlers still depended on. Change had come to the land, and it had a name: Silas Trammell. He was a man in his 40s, thick in the chest and short in the temper. He had come from somewhere east with a pocket full of money and a heart full of greed. He claimed a wide stretch of land, more than he could ever use, and called it the Bar T Ranch. He ran cattle that drank the creeks low and chewed the grass to nothing. And he had brought a new neighbor. Her name was Ada Whitlow. She was young, only 21, and she had come from Missouri as a mail-order bride. She was a slip of a thing, with hair the color of dried corn silk and eyes that seemed too wide for the harsh sunlight. Tahan had seen her from a distance. He had also seen the bruise. It was a dark, purple mark high on her cheekbone, creeping toward her eye. Silas told everyone at the mercantile it was a fool horse accident, that she was not used to ranch life. Everyone understood it was a lie. Everyone understood that a mail-order bride was property, same as a horse or a cow, and a man could do what he wanted with his property. The air out here was thick with more than dust. There was tension. It was a sharp, ugly thing, pulled tight between the new white settlers, the Mexican families who had been here for 100 years, and the native tribes like his own. The local marshal was a man named Deke, a man who liked Silas Trammell's whiskey and whose pockets jingled with Silas Trammell's coin. In this land, the only law was the law of the strongest arm, the fastest gun, the heaviest purse. Tahan walked a careful line. He traded with a few of the smaller ranchers, men who treated him with a cautious respect. He traded venison for flour, or fixed a broken wagon wheel for cartridges. But he stayed clear of the Bar T. He wanted no part of Silas Trammell or his business. His avoidance was a quiet thing, a simple turning away. But his heart was not as hard as the land, on the edge of the struggling settlement, where the poorest families lived in shelters made of scrap tin and hope. Tahan moved unseen. He would find a dry creek bed and, with the knowledge of his grandfathers, dig until he found the seep. He would line it with stones, creating a small trap for the precious water. In the mornings, families would find a fresh strip of dried deer meat or a small pouch of ground nuts left on a fence post. No one ever saw who left it. One evening, at that time of day the Spanish called the hour of ghosts, Tahan was checking his snares on a high mesa. He stood still, a part of the landscape, and his ears caught the sounds from the valley below. From the direction of the Bar T Ranch, he heard the sharp, terrified neigh of a horse. It was not a sound of simple fright. It was a sound of pain. Then came another sound, the clear, sharp shatter of glass. He moved without thinking, walking to the edge of the sandy bluff. He looked down on the Bar T compound. The main house was lit, but the light was yellow and angry. He saw the door to the kitchen thrown open. He saw Ada Whitlow. She stumbled out, clutching her side. She staggered toward the dark shape of the stables. Even from this distance, in the fading light, he could see the dark stain on her pale dress. And when she turned her head, he saw the bright, fresh blood running from her lip. Tahan stood like a stone. Every part of him, every instinct for survival, screamed at him to turn away. This was not his fight. This was a white man's house, a white man's wife. The first and final rule of the frontier was to never, ever get involved in another man's family business. To do so was to invite death, or worse, to bring trouble down on his own people. He stood, his jaw tight, and watched her disappear into the blackness of the stables. He did not move. He did not intervene. He was a survivor, and survivors minded their own affairs. He turned and walked back to his dugout, the weight of what he had seen pressing on him heavier than his rifle. That night, his sleep was troubled. He dreamed. He did not dream of the woman or the blood. He dreamed of the medicine mounds, the sacred hills of his people. In his dream, the stones of the mounds were weeping, not with tears, but with small drops of clean rain, and standing at the mouth of a dark cave, blocking the entrance, was a doe. She was a beautiful, sleek animal, and she stood her ground, her large, dark eyes fixed on him. She did not move. She just stood, a silent guardian. He woke before the dawn. The image of the doe burned into his mind. He remembered the words of his grandmother, a woman of great wisdom. When you see the doe, she had told him as a child, it is a sign. It means you must protect. It is the mother's heart. The dream troubled him all morning as he worked, oiling a stubborn flintlock for a Mexican freighter. He tried to push the image away. Protection was a dangerous business. Later in the day, he rode past the edge of the Bar T land, staying well clear of the main house. He saw her near the fence line, mending a gap in the barbed wire, a task too heavy for her. He had not meant to be seen. He had a small corn cake in his saddlebag, left over from his morning meal. He often left them for the children at the settlement. Ada saw him. She did not startle, but she went very still. Her face was pale. The bruise was darker now, a sick yellow and purple. Her lip was swollen and split. She looked at him, a man she had only seen as a shadow, a native man who lived on the edges. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was quiet, barely carried on the wind. Tahan stopped his horse, his hand resting on the pommel. He said nothing. The neighbor," she said, her eyes dropping to the wire she held. "The one who sometimes leaves the little corn cakes on the fence. Please tell him, thank you." Tahan looked at her for a long moment. He saw the shame in her, and the fear, and something else. A small, banked ember of pride. He knew she thought the cakes were for her. He knew he was the man she was talking about. But to admit it would be to connect himself to her, to this place. He was a survivor. He just nodded his head, a single, curt gesture. Then he nudged his horse forward, leaving her alone by the fence. He did not admit to being that man. As he rode away, he felt the wind. It had been coming from the south for weeks, hot and dry. Now, it was shifting. It was coming from the north. The air felt heavy, and the sky in the distance was turning a sick, yellowy brown. A change was coming. A storm. The sandstorm that was brewing on the horizon was an omen, a sign that the dry, brittle peace of the Llano Estacado was about to break. The storm broke just after the moon set. It was not a storm of rain, but of grit. The north wind that had been promised arrived as a howling, physical thing, a solid wall of red dust that turned the night blind. It shrieked with the sound of 1,000 grieving voices. In his dugout, Tahan had barred the door. He sat in the dark, listening to the world being scoured, the fine dust already finding its way through invisible cracks, coating his tongue. He knew this wind. It was a wind that peeled away anything that was not rooted deep. At the Bar T Ranch, the wind was an excuse for malice. Silas Trammell hated the sound of it. It made his cattle thin, and it made him drink. He was in the main dining room with 3 of his hired cowhands, men with mean eyes and greedy hands. The bottle of whiskey was almost empty, and the air was thick with smoke. "Get in here," Silas bellowed, his voice thick. "We have guests. Woman, stop hiding." Ada was in the kitchen, her hands clenched so tightly her fingernails dug into her palms. Maria, the cook, was pretending to scrub a pot, her dark eyes fixed on the wooden board. "You must go, mija," Maria whispered. "He is in a state." Ada walked into the room. It smelled of stale sweat, cheap whiskey, and wet wool. The men stopped talking and just looked at her, their eyes stripping her bare. "Pour," Silas commanded, shoving his empty tin cup toward her. Her hand trembled as she lifted the heavy bottle. The whiskey splashed onto the rough wooden table. "Clumsy," Silas sneered. "Now pour for the boys. They have been working hard." She moved to the next man, a large man with a matted beard. He reached out and grabbed her wrist, his calloused thumb rubbing her skin. "You are a pretty little thing, are not you?" Ada wrenched her arm free. "Do not put your hands on me!" A low laugh rumbled from the man. Silas Trammell's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up, his face flushed. "She has got spirit, boys, but that is what I paid for." He stepped toward her, his bulk blocking the light. "These men are my friends. Ada, they are my guests. You will be nice to my friends. You will entertain them." The word hung in the foul air, heavy and understood. Ada's breath caught, but she stood her ground. "I will serve your table. Mr. Trammell, I will not entertain them." The good humor vanished from Silas's face. "You will do what you are told. You are my wife." "No," she whispered, a word of defiance that cost her everything. The slap was a crack of sound, open-palmed and brutal. It snapped her head back and sent her stumbling. She tripped over a wooden stool and fell backward, her body crashing against the cast-iron kitchen stove. She cried out, a sharp gasp of agony as the hot metal seared through the thin fabric of her dress, branding her shoulder. A man who had been sitting quietly in the shadows, away from the others, spoke. He was lean and watchful, with eyes as cold and gray as river stones. His name was Caleb Rusk, a bounty hunter passing through, enjoying Silas's hospitality. "You have got a fighter there, Trammell," Caleb said, his voice a low drawl. "But fighters just need a heavier hand." As Ada tried to push herself up, wincing from the pain, a small, folded piece of paper fell from the bodice of her dress. Before she could react, Caleb Rusk moved. He was fast, like a snake. He plucked the paper from the floor. "Now what is this?" "It is nothing," Ada cried, lunging for it. "Give it back to me!" He held it easily out of her reach. His cold eyes scanned the lines of her careful, desperate handwriting. "To the federal marshal, in St. Louis, Missouri." He clicked his tongue. "A list of grievances, a plea for help. You are a fool." He looked at Ada, then at Silas, with a deliberate, insulting calm. He tore the letter into 4 pieces and let them flutter to the dusty floor. "You do not understand where you are, girl," Caleb Rusk said, his voice soft. "There is no St. Louis out here. There is no one to write to. Out here, you belong to the Bar T. Nobody is coming to save you." Outside, the storm had begun to die, the wind easing its howl to a low moan. Tahan was checking the tethers on his horses. The dust had spooked them, and he needed to calm them. He had a heavy block of rock salt in a canvas bag, meant for a small rancher to the south. He decided to cut along the fence line of the bar T, using the noise of the wind as cover. He was not trespassing, but he was close enough to be careful. He heard the yelling first, a man's angry roar. Then he heard the woman's cry of pain, sharp and clear. He froze. His mind screamed at him, "Do not get involved. This is not your business. Walk away." But then he smelled it. Smoke. It was not the scent of a hearth fire. It was the sharp, ugly smell of scorched cotton, and beneath it, the sick, sweet smell of burned skin. He moved silently, keeping to the shadows of the outbuildings. He peered through the swirling dust at the main house. The window was grimy, but he could see inside. He saw the men. He saw Silas, his hand raised to strike again. He saw Ada on the floor, clutching her shoulder. And he saw the small, telling wisp of smoke rising from her dress, where the fabric was smoldering, fused to her skin. He saw Maria, the cook, standing in the kitchen doorway, her hands pressed to her mouth, paralyzed by fear. Tahan broke his rule. He did not shout in English. He used the language he shared with Maria, the swift, clear Spanish of the territory. "Maria!" he called out, his voice cutting through the wind. "Agua el fuego apagalo ahora," water. The fire put it out now. Inside the dining room, every man froze. "Who in the blue hell is that?" one of the cowhands yelled, fumbling for the pistol at his belt. He staggered to the front door and threw it open, raising his gun into the dark. He saw Tahan's shape, a shadow against the lesser dark of the fence line. A flash of orange split the night. The bullet shrieked past Tahan's head, so close he felt the heat of it singe his ear. Tahan did not flinch. He did not reach for his rifle. His hand moved to his hip and pulled the smooth, worn handle of his tomahawk. It was a tool, perfectly balanced. He did not aim at the man. He aimed at the light. He threw it. The tomahawk spun once and struck the brass-hanging lantern on the porch. The world exploded in a spray of shattered glass and burning oil. The yard and the house were plunged into darkness. "He put out the light," the man shouted, firing blind into the night. In that black confusion, Tahan vaulted the fence. He was a shadow moving within shadows. He was at the open doorway before the men's eyes had adjusted. Ada was on the floor, staring into the darkness, her face pale with shock. He did not speak. He grabbed her. She was light, all bone and terror. He hauled her up, throwing her over his good shoulder in a fireman's carry, and he ran. He was across the yard, heading for the cover of the stables. Another shot rang out. This one was not wild. It was a rifle, its crack sharp and precise. Caleb Rusk stood in the darkened doorway, aiming at the sound of Tahan's running feet. Tahan felt a white-hot poker slam into his left shoulder. The impact was stunning, a brutal punch that almost drove him to his knees, but he did not fall. He gritted his teeth against the pain and kept running, vanishing into the night. The woman, a desperate, trembling weight on his back. He had stood up, and the act had been paid for in his own blood. He did not stop running for a mile, maybe more. He followed the winding, shallow bed of a dry wash, the soft sand muffling their escape. The pain in his shoulder was a hot, spreading fire. He finally ducked into a small, hidden hollow by Cottonwood Creek, a place his people had used for shelter, shielded by a thicket of willows and heavy boulders. The creek was barely a trickle, but the water was clean. He set Ada down. She was shaking violently, her teeth chattering. Though the night was not cold, her dress was ruined, the burn on her shoulder a raw, blistering patch. He ignored his own wound. He tore a strip of cloth from his own shirt, soaked it in the cold creek water, and handed it to her. "Hold this, for the burn." She did, her hands fumbling. Tahan then worked fast, his movements economical despite the pain. He walked backward out of the hollow, using a willow branch to brush away their footprints. He moved to a nearby deer trail and followed it east, toward the open plains. For a few hundred yards, he scuffed the dirt, broke a few branches, made it look like two people running in panic. Then, he retraced his path, stepping only on stones, back to the invisible sanctuary of the creek. It was an old trick. It would not fool Caleb Rusk for long, but it might buy them the dawn. Back at the bar T, there was chaos and rage. By the time the sun thought about rising, Marshall Deke was there. He looked tired and unhappy, until Silas Trammell poured him a cup of coffee laced with whiskey and pressed a $20 gold piece into his hand. "He stole her! Marshall!" Silas roared, his face purple. "That Comanche buck, Tahan, came right onto my property, attacked my men and stole my wife." Caleb Rusk, his rifle already cleaned and oiled, nodded in agreement. "He threw a hatchet at me, tried to kill me. I returned fire. I believe I winged him. He is armed, martial, and dangerous. He kidnapped a white woman." Marshall Deke knew Tahan. He knew him to be quiet, a man who minded his own business. He also knew who paid for the new sign on his office. He sighed, the gold coin heavy in his pocket. "Kidnapping a white woman," Deke said, testing the words. "That is a hanging offense. I will put out a reward." He pulled a notebook from his pocket. "A small one, $50. Alive. Just enough to get the local boys interested. We do not want a war." Caleb Rusk smiled, a thin, cold expression. $50 was nothing, but the charge, kidnapping, that was a useful, legal word for a hunt. The first light of dawn was a weak, gray smear in the sky. Ada had stopped shaking, but she was huddled into herself, staring at the muddy water of the creek. Tahan sat 10 feet away from her, his back against a rock. He had packed his own wound with mud and yarrow leaves. It was a graze, clean through the muscle. It hurt like hell. He knew what he had done. He had broken the one rule that kept men like him alive. He had interfered. "When the sun is higher," he said, his voice flat and hard, "I will take you back." Ada's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a new, sharper terror. "What?" "I will take you back to the bar T," he repeated, not looking at her. "I will tell Trammell I found you wandering in the storm. I will say you were lost. It is the only way. It will stop the trouble." "Trouble," she whispered. Then her voice cracked. "No, please, no, you cannot. He will kill me. This time. He will kill me." "He is your husband," Tahan said. The word tasted like poison. "He is not," she cried, the words tearing out of her. She was fumbling in a hidden pocket in the seam of her skirt, her fingers clumsy. She pulled out a small packet wrapped in oilskin. "He is not my husband. He is my owner." She scrambled across the small space between them, pushing the packet into his hand. "Look, please, look." He unfolded the papers. They were letters. An advertisement from a matrimonial gazette in Missouri. It promised a good life, a partnership, a home. Then there were the letters from Silas, flowery and false, and underneath it all, a postal money order receipt, a purchase. "He did not want a wife," she whispered, her voice raw with shame and fury. He wanted a woman for his men. He calls it the backyard arrangement. It means, when he has guests, I am supposed to—" She could not say the word. "I refused," she said, looking at the ground. "That is why he hits me. That is why I wrote the letter to the marshal in my home state. I was begging for help. Caleb R—" She choked on the name. "Caleb found it. Now they know." She looked up at him, her face a mask of dried blood, dust and tears. "If you take me back, I am dead." Tahan looked at the forged marriage lines. He looked at the receipt. He looked at the angry red burn on her shoulder. He looked at the bloody mud caked on his own. He was trapped. He stood between two impossible cliffs. If he helped her, he was a dead man, A Comanche, stealing a white woman. It was the one crime the frontier would not forgive. It would bring the marshals, the bounty hunters, and every trigger-happy fool for 50 miles down on his head. It meant a rope. If he took her back, he was a coward. He was throwing her to the wolves, returning her to a life of rape and torture. And, in his mind, sharp and bright as the morning star, he saw the dream. He saw the doe standing at the mouth of the dark cave, her body a shield. It means you must protect. His gut, his history, his every instinct for survival told him to run, to leave her, to save himself. His conscience, a new and troublesome voice, told him to stay. He looked at the woman crying softly by the water, and Tahan, the man who had survived by never interfering, knew he had run out of ground. The sun was not yet fully clear of the horizon, but the air was already bright and hot. The land had been washed clean by the storm, but the peace was thin. Tahan knew they were coming before he heard them. A faint vibration in the earth, a disturbance in the morning calls of the birds. "In there," he said to Ada, his voice a low command. He pointed to a dark fissure in the rock wall, half hidden by a curtain of dried tumbleweeds. "It is a salt lick. Collapsed. Go to the back. Do not make a sound. Do not move. No matter what you hear, do not come out." She looked at him, her eyes still holding the terror of the night. "What will you do?" "They are hunting me," he said. "They will not be looking for you, not yet. They will be looking for a man who is running. I will not run." She scrambled into the shallow cave, the smell of salt and dry earth filling her nose. She crawled into the deepest shadow and pressed herself flat against the cool stone. Tahan took a coil of thin, strong sinew from his pouch. He took his fishing line, baited with a piece of dried meat, and walked to the edge of the trickling creek. He found a spot, a small pool where a fish might, on a better day, actually be waiting. He sat down, his back to the trail, his wounded shoulder a dull, throbbing ache. He cast the line into the water. He looked like a man without a care in the world, a native man wasting a hot morning. He had been there for 10 minutes when he heard the horses, 4 of them, moving with purpose. "Over there!" a voice shouted. It was one of the deputies. "By the creek! It is him!" The horses crashed through the brittle willow bushes. Tahan did not turn around. He just slowly, carefully, began to reel in his empty line. Marshal Deke rode to the front, his shotgun resting in the crook of his arm. With him were 3 deputies, all local men who owed their jobs to Silas Trammell, and slightly behind them, his cold gray eyes scanning every rock and shadow, was Caleb Rusk. "Tahan," Marshal Deke said, his voice trying for authority. "Stand up. Hands where I can see them." Tahan slowly reeled in the last of his line. He stood, his hands empty at his sides, and turned to face them. He ignored the marshal and the deputies. His eyes found Caleb Rusk. "Morning, Marshal," Tahan said, his voice calm. "Fine day for a ride, if you do not mind the heat." "Save it," Deke snapped, his face sweating. "Where is she? Where's the woman?" Tahan looked confused. "Woman, Marshal. You have been drinking early. There is no woman here, just me, trying to catch a fish. But they are not biting." "Do not play dumb with me, boy," a deputy snarled, raising his rifle. "I tracked them this far," Caleb Rusk said, his voice cutting through the tension. He dismounted smoothly, his rifle never leaving his hand. He was not looking at Tahan. He was looking at the ground. "He is good. I will give him that. The trail he left heading east was a fake." Caleb walked a slow circle around the small clearing, his eyes missing nothing. "But he is wounded, and a wounded man gets careless." He stopped, his gaze fixed on a clump of grass near the willows. "He gets real careless." Caleb knelt. He pointed to a single dark red drop on a blade of grass. Blood. Tahan's blood, from the night before. "He was right here," Caleb said, a thin smile touching his lips. And he was with her. He is hiding her. He looked up, his eyes locking on the fissure in the rocks, the place half hidden by tumbleweeds. Smart, a hole in the ground. Caleb started to walk toward the cave. I would not do that, Tahan said, his voice still quiet. Caleb laughed. You would not, would you? He took another step. No, Tahan said, I would not. Caleb's boot touched the pile of tumbleweeds. There was a sound, a thwack and a snap, as a loop of braided rawhide shot up from the loose sand. It was a modified snare. A coyote trap Tahan had set just an hour before, anchored to a heavy log he had buried. The loop was meant for a leg, but Caleb was fast. He jerked back, and the snare caught him high, tightening with a brutal, sickening crack around his right wrist. Caleb roared, not in pain, but in pure, white, hot rage. He was jerked off his feet, his rifle flying from his hand as the rawhide loop bit deep, pulling his arm up to the level of his shoulder. He was trapped. His gun hand caught fast. The three deputies spun, their guns all pointing at Tahan. Do not shoot, Marshal Deke yelled, his horse skittish. Hold your fire. From inside the salt-lick cave, Ada heard the scream of rage. She heard the horses, the men. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it would break. She clamped her hand over her own mouth, tasting the salt and the dust, stifling the sob that was trying to claw its way out of her throat. She had almost given them away. You animal, Caleb hissed, struggling against the trap, his face contorted. You filthy animal. Tahan had not moved. He simply stood, his hands still at his sides. Now, he said to Marshal Deke, we can talk, or your friend can lose his hand. That sinew is tight. It cuts deep. Cut him loose, you idiot, Deke yelled at a deputy. No, Caleb snarled. Keep your guns on him. If he moves, kill him. Tahan raised his hands slowly, palms out. I will not move. He took 2 steps back, into the open. I am here, Marshal. I am not fighting you. Where is the woman? Deke shouted, his face purple. You kidnapped her. That is a hanging offense. Tahan, you know that. Give her up, and maybe, Silas will be merciful. Tahan let out a short, harsh laugh. Silas, merciful. He shook his head. The woman is not here. You are a liar, Caleb spat, still fighting the snare. The woman is not your concern. Tahan said, she is my concern. I found her, Marshal, wandering. After the storm, she was hurt. He is lying, Caleb yelled. He was on the property. He attacked us. I am bringing her back, Tahan said, cutting him off. His voice was loud now, carrying to the woman in the cave. I am bringing her back, Marshal, just like the law says. A man finds stray property. He returns it to the owner. Ada, hidden in the dark, felt those words like a slap. Stray property. But, Tahan continued, his voice hardening, the law also says you have to take care of property. You cannot just abuse it. This woman, she is hurt bad. Marshal, she has a burn. She has bruises all over. From before the storm. From before I ever found her. What are you saying? Deke asked, lowering his shotgun, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. I am saying I will give her back to her husband, Tahan said, but only if you, as the law, get her a medical guarantee, a medical certificate, like the army. He knew they would not understand the concept, so he simplified. You bring Tomasa, the midwife. You have Tomasa check the woman's injuries. You have her write down every bruise, every burn, and you sign it, as a witness, the law. Marshal Deke was flummoxed. This was not in the script. He was supposed to arrest a kidnapper, not investigate a domestic dispute. Just then, another horse appeared, plowing through the creek. It was Silas Trammell. He was not a good rider. He was red-faced and breathing hard. his heavy frame jouncing in the saddle. "What in the nine hells is this?" Silas boomed, his eyes falling on Caleb, still trapped. "A circus, Deke. Why have you not shot him?" "Silas," Deke said, looking relieved and nervous at the same time. We were just… Tahan here. He says he will give her back." "Of course he will give her back." Silas dismounted, his boots sinking in the mud. "She belongs to me." He stomped over to Tahan, his face a mask of fury. "Where is she, you thieving savage?" "First," Tahan said, holding his ground, "the midwife." "Midwife?" Silas bellowed. "What are you talking about?" "He wants a medical check." "Silas," Deke explained weakly. "He says she is hurt." Silas's eyes went flat and cold. "Hurt. She is clumsy. She fell into the stove. She ran off in a panic." He waved his hand, dismissing it. "We do not need a midwife for that. Now, Deke, arrest this man. And you." He jabbed a thick finger at a deputy. "Cut Mr. Rusk loose." "No," Tahan said. It was just one word. "What did you say to me?" Silas's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "I said no." A small sound came from the cave, a whimper. It was Ada. She had heard Silas's voice. She was coming out. She crawled from the darkness, blinking in the bright, cruel sun. She was covered in dust, her hair matted, her dress torn, the red, weeping burn on her shoulder visible to everyone. She looked like a trapped animal, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it was silent. "Ada!" Silas roared, a dark triumph in his voice. "Get over here, now!" She flinched and started to cry, silent tears of despair running through the grime on her face. She held up her arms, showing them the old, yellowing bruises mixed with the new, raw purple ones. He, she stammered, looking at Marshal Deke. "He beats me." "Shut your mouth, woman," Silas ordered. Tahan spoke, and his voice cut through the air, clear and cold as the water in the creek. "If this was a legal wife, Mr. Trammell," he said, "you would not need iron bars and a whip." That was the breaking point. The public humiliation, the defiance from a man he considered less than human, was too much. Silas Trammell's face contorted. He drew back his heavy leather riding crop, a braided quirt he carried at his belt. "I will show you," he hissed. "How I handle my property. I will show you discipline." He lunged at Ada, the whip raised to strike. Tahan moved. He was not fast. He was just there. He stepped between them, his back to Silas, his body shielding the woman. He did not raise his hands to fight. He just stood, a living barrier. He put his hand out and caught the quirt, the leather biting into his palm. "No more," he said. The world stopped for a second. Silas, his arm caught, Ada, her eyes wide. Deke, his mouth open. Caleb Rusk, his hand still trapped in the snare, had used the chaos to pull his Bowie knife with his left hand. He had just sawed through the last of the rawhide. He saw Tahan, his back turned. He saw Silas, furious. He saw his chance. This was not law. This was an opportunity. Caleb raised his rifle with his free hand, the raw, bleeding skin of his right wrist forgotten. He aimed, not for Tahan, but for the woman. A dead woman could not testify. But Tahan had moved. He was pulling Ada away, turning. Caleb shifted his aim. He fired. It was a dirty bullet, aimed from the hip, meant for Tahan's gut. The bullet shrieked through the air. It missed its mark. It tore through the crown of Tahan's wide-brimmed hat, spinning it from his head. The lead, deflected, grazed the side of Ada's head, just above the temple. It was a shallow cut, but it struck her with the force of a punch. She collapsed, not unconscious, but stunned, a red line of blood welling up instantly. All hell broke loose. The gunshot, echoing in the small clearing, spooked the horses. The deputies' mounts reared and screamed, One deputy was thrown. Marshal Deke's shotgun went off, blasting a hole in the sky. At the bar, T. Maria, the cook, had followed Silas, carrying a pot of boiling water for his morning coffee. She had seen it all from the edge of the clearing. When the bullet fired, she screamed, and in a primal act of defense, she threw the pot. The scalding water and coffee grounds arched through the air, splashing across the back of Silas Trammell's horse. The horse screamed, a sound of pure agony, and exploded into a bucking, kicking frenzy. Silas, caught by surprise, was thrown from the saddle, landing hard in the mud of the creek bed. In that perfect, beautiful, violent chaos, Tahan acted. He did not run, he did not hide. He scooped up the stunned Ada from the ground, his wounded shoulders screaming in protest. He threw her onto the back of his own horse, a powerful Appaloosa that had been standing patiently, tethered to a willow. The horse was trained for battle. It did not bolt. Tahan vaulted up behind her. He grabbed the reins, kicked his heels into the horse's flanks, and they plunged into the creek, water flying. Caleb Rusk, on his feet now, his face a mask of blood and fury, raised his rifle. He fired again, but they were gone, a spray of mud and water, disappearing into the tangle of willows and the deep-cut hills beyond. Marshal Deke, wiping mud from his face, watched them go. Silas Trammell was sputtering and cursing in the creek. Caleb Rusk was reloading, his trapped hand bleeding freely. "Well," the marshal said to no one, his voice shaking, "I guess he is a kidnapper now." The chase had begun. Tahan, the man who lived on the fringe, was no longer a neighbor. He was the bride stealer. He was an outlaw, and he was riding for his life, with the woman the law had failed, held tight in front of him. They did not stop riding for hours. Tahan pushed the Appaloosa hard, but with a knowledge of the land that saved the animal from ruin. He did not take the easy flats, which would leave a trail a fool could follow. He rode them through the rocky beds of creeks, over sandstone ridges that held no print, and along the high, narrow spines of mesas. He was heading for the great scar in the earth, the place the Spanish called Palo Duro Canyon. It was a place of refuge and a place of danger, a maze of red rock and shadows. By midday, the heat was a physical weight, and the horse was lathered. Tahan's own shoulder wound had reopened, a slow, hot ooze of blood that stuck his shirt to his back. Ada had been silent, clinging to the horse's mane, her body held stiff with shock and pain. The bullet graze on her temple had stopped bleeding, but the flesh around it was swelling into an ugly, dark ridge. Tahan finally found what he was looking for, a deep cut in the canyon wall. A side canyon so narrow that the sun only touched the bottom of it for an hour a day. A seep of water, green with algae, trickled from the rock. He slid from the horse, his legs unsteady, and reached up for Ada. "We rest here," he said. His voice was a rasp. She almost fell into his arms. Her body, which had been rigid, went completely limp. He lifted her down and was shocked by a wave of heat that came from her skin. She was burning with fever. The graze was infected, the grime of the clearing and the dirty bullet fostering a sickness in her. She was mumbling, her eyes unfocused. "No, please, do not hit me." "You are safe," Tahan said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. He laid her down on a patch of clean sand in the deepest shade. "Drink." He held his water skin to her lips. She sipped, greedy and desperate. "Small sips," he ordered, pulling it away. "No more. You will make yourself sick. Sip, wait, then sip again." He taught her water discipline as if she were a child, the first lesson of survival. For the next 2 days, the canyon became their world. Ada's fever climbed. She drifted in and out of a delirious fog, haunted by the stove, by Silas's face, by Caleb's cold eyes. Tahan did not sleep. He became a guardian, a provider. He tended her wounds. He used the last of the clean water to wash the cut on her head, cleaning it with a bitter paste he made from chewing yarrow leaves, the same he had used on his own shoulder. He tended her burn, which was raw and angry. He covered it with a poultice of chewed willow bark to dull the pain and draw out the heat. The mosquitoes, drawn by the water and the blood, were relentless. He could not risk a full fire, which would send a column of smoke visible for miles. Instead, he built a small, smoky fire in a rock hollow, using damp, punky wood and sagebrush. The thick, acrid smoke kept the insects at bay. It was a miserable, choking smoke, but it was better than the fever the insects carried. He hunted. He set 2 snares and caught a lean rabbit. He roasted it, and from its meager flesh and his own small pouch of cornmeal, he made a thin, hot gruel. He had to force it between her lips, a spoonful at a time. "You will eat," he commanded softly. When she tried to turn her head away, "You will live." On the 3rd morning, the fever broke. He had been dozing, sitting up against the rock wall, his rifle across his lap. He woke to the sound of her voice, clear and weak. My dream, you were a doe." Tahan opened his eyes. She was watching him. Her eyes were her own again, pale blue and exhausted, but clear. "It was a fever," he said, standing up, his joints stiff. "You were sick." "Thank you," she whispered. The words were simple, but they held the weight of her life. He just nodded and turned away to check the horse. He was not comfortable with her thanks. He had acted, and now he was responsible. It was a heavy, unfamiliar burden. "We cannot stay here," he said, his back to her. "Caleb Rusk will not have stopped." They traveled for another day, slower now. Tahan walking to spare the horse, Ada riding. They moved only in the early morning and the late evening, hiding in the shadows of the great canyon during the bright heat. They came at last to a place Tahan had been seeking. It was a small, quiet mission, a simple adobe chapel built by the creek, its white walls stained red by the dust. It was a place of sanctuary for anyone, Mexican, native, or settler, who needed it. It was run by a woman known only as Mother Superior Isidora. She met them at the wooden gate, a tall woman with dark, wise eyes and hands that had seen a lifetime of work. She looked at Tahan, at Ada, at the blood and the dust, and she did not ask a single question. "He needs water," she said, pointing to the horse, "and you both need mending. Come." She led them inside. It was cool and dark, the thick adobe walls holding back the sun. The air smelled of beeswax, dried herbs, and calm. She took Ada to a small, clean room with a simple cot. "I will see to the woman first," Mother Isidora said to Tahan, a quiet command. Tahan waited outside, sitting on a wooden bench, his rifle at his feet. He felt the tension of the last 4 days drain out of him, leaving him exhausted. He heard them talking, the low murmur of their voices. Later, Mother Isidora came out. She carried a wooden bowl with bloody water and stained linen. "Her wounds are clean," she said to Tahan. "The graze was foul, but you did well. The burn is deep. It will scar. But she is strong." She then looked at his shoulder, at the torn, bloody shirt. "Now it is your turn. Son, you are no good to her dead." He allowed her to clean his wound as well. She was gentle but firm, her fingers probing the torn muscle. "Caleb Rusk," Tahan said, his jaw tight with the sting of the alcohol she used. "Yes," she said, her hands never stopping. "He has a reputation. A man who enjoys his work too much." She finished the bandage, pulling it tight. "Saving a life is a hard business, is it not?" "I did not. I was not." Tahan fumbled for words. "You were not trying to save her," Mother Isidora finished for him. "You were just trying to do what was right. It is often the same thing, and it always costs more than we think." She looked at him, her gaze direct. "Saving one person, Tahan, is how we save ourselves." He stayed outside while Ada slept. a deep, healing sleep. The next day, while Tahan was miles away, hunting for fresh meat, Ada sat with Mother Isadora in a small courtyard, shelling beans. "He said very little," Ada said, her voice quiet. "He saved my life, and I do not even know his name." "His name is Tahan," Isadora said. "He is a good man, from a good people. He walks a hard path." Ada was silent for a long time, the only sound the dry whisper of the bean pods. "He is an outlaw now, because of me." "He is an outlaw because of Silas Trammell," Mother Isadora corrected her gently. Ada finally spoke of her past, the words tumbling out, as if a dam had broken. She spoke of the garment factory in Missouri, the endless hours, the noise, the lint that filled your lungs, the gray, hopeless poverty. "I just wanted something else, something clean." She told her about the letters. He wrote such beautiful letters. He spoke of a new land, of building a home, a partnership. She looked at her own hands, calloused and sore. "I did not know I was the only thing he was buying." "What did you want, child?" Ada looked up, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. "It sounds so simple now, so foolish. The simple dreams are the most important." "I wanted a garden," Ada whispered. "Just a small patch of ground. My own. I wanted to grow sunflowers. They are so tall, and they always turn their faces to the light. No matter how dark the morning, they find the light." Later, when the sun was low, Tahan returned. He gave Mother Isadora the meat, and he sat with Ada on the adobe wall as the air cooled. The silence between them was different now. It was not empty, it was shared. To fill it, Tahan spoke. "My grandfather, my mother's father. He was a great warrior, but he was a wise man. He made me promise him something when I was a boy. He took my hand and said, 'Life is hard, little runner. It will make you hard. But do not let your heart become a stone. Do not let any woman cry because of you.'" He looked at his own hands. "I broke that promise. My people, we have seen so many broken promises. Treaties signed on paper, then broken by greed. Land given, then land taken." He shook his head. "I thought the only way to live was to stand outside, to not get involved, to not promise anything." He looked at her, at the bandage on her temple, the raw burn on her shoulder. "I see now. Standing outside is also a choice, a bad one." His heart, which had been closed for so long, felt a strange, painful softening. The next morning, the peace was broken. Marshal Deke and a deputy had ridden to the chapel. They did not come in. They had nailed a piece of paper to the heavy wooden gate and ridden away. Mother Isadora brought it inside. Her face was grim. It was a wanted poster. Tahan's name was on it, written in heavy black ink. Wanted for kidnapping, horse theft, and attempted murder. The reward was now $200. "They are painting you as the villain," Mother Isadora said, her voice angry. "This is how Silas Trammell works. He buys the law, and the law writes his story." Tahan looked at the paper, his face hardening into a mask of stone. "We will go, tonight. We will not bring his trouble to your door." "Wait," Mother Isadora said. She took the poster and walked to a large, unadorned wooden cross that hung on the chapel wall. The cross was old. The wood cracked. She folded the poster and slid it deep into a fissure in the wood, hiding it from sight. "They crucify justice," she said, her voice like iron. "But it does not mean it is dead. It is only hidden." She turned to Tahan. "Where will you run? Son, to the west they will hunt you, to the north. His arm is long. You will be running forever. A man with a woman. You will not last a month." "What else can we do?" Ada asked, her voice trembling. "He has all the power." Tahan looked at the cross, where the lie of his warrant was hidden. He looked at Ada, who had dreamed of sunflowers. He looked at his own hands, one stained with blood, the other with engine grease. "No," Tahan said, the decision coming to him, sudden and complete as a thunderclap. We will not run. Not anymore. He turned to Ada. You said you have papers, the letters, the receipt. Yes, she said, in my pocket, the oilskin. Maria saw it. Tahan said, thinking hard. She saw him hit you. She saw the burn. And Tomasa, the midwife. She saw the old bruises from before. Eli at the post office. He would have a record of the money order. He was pacing now, the energy of a new plan thrumming through him. He is not the only one who can use the white man's law. His story is strong, but the truth is stronger, if you have enough of it. He stopped and looked at Mother Isadora. Fort Worth, they have a real court there, a federal court, not a bought man in a dusty town. We will go to Fort Worth. We will get the proof. We will get Tomasa. We will get Eli. And we will tell our story. It was a crazy, impossible plan. It meant riding back into the danger, not away from it. Ada, who had been a victim for so long, stood up. How? She asked. Not why, but how. Tahan looked at her. We learned to fight, together. That afternoon, their training began. Tahan took a small, 4-barreled Derringer from his saddlebag. He gave it to Ada. For you, it is not for hunting. It is for a moment, up close, when there is no other choice. He taught her how to load it, how to aim for the center of a man's chest, how to pull the trigger without flinching. She hated the feel of it, but she learned. For himself. Tahan pulled out an old, rusted Winchester rifle he had taken in trade. It was missing a firing pin. He spent hours in the mission's small smithy, patiently filing a new pin from a hardened nail. He cleaned the barrel, oiled the action. He took a piece of tin and fashioned a crude cone, a flash hider, to screw onto the muzzle. It would make his night shots harder to trace. When they left the chapel 2 nights later, under the cover of a new moon, they were not 2 fugitives. They were 2 people with a single, desperate purpose. As they rode out, Tahan paused. He reached down and picked up 3 flat, red stones. He stacked them, one on top of the other, by the side of the trail. What is that? Ada asked. A marker, he said. It means we were here. It means we are on the path. They rode east, back toward the danger, and on the trail behind them, they left a small, quiet pile of stones, a monument to their survival, and the first mile of a new, shared journey. The web that Silas Trammell spun was one of greed, but it was reinforced with cold, hard coin. He sat in the office of a dusty lawyer in a town 50 miles east, a man whose suit was as slick as his morals, for $100. The lawyer agreed to discover a lost marriage certificate, one that was perfectly legal, properly filed, and, most importantly, backdated by 6 months. Silas left the office with a piece of paper that, in the eyes of the territory's law, made Ada Whitlow his property beyond any shadow of a doubt. Caleb Rusk did not bother with lawyers. He dealt in a different currency, fear and lead. His reputation, and the fresh $200 bounty, was enough. He rode into a camp of buffalo hunters and found 2 men he knew from his days in Kansas. They were brothers, hollow-eyed and trigger-happy, men who would kill a man for his boots. Caleb offered them $25 each for a week's work, plus a share of the bounty. They agreed before he even finished the sentence. The hunt was no longer just Caleb Rusk. It was a professional pack. Tahan and Ada moved through this web, unaware of how it was tightening. They traveled only at night, hiding during the heat of the day. Their first goal was the small, jackal village where Tomasa, the midwife, lived. It was a place of deep poverty, sitting on the edge of Silas Trammell's land, a cluster of families who survived on his meager wages and their own quiet endurance. They found Tomasa in her small, clean home, the air thick with the smell of dried herbs and simmering beans. She was an old woman, her face a map of wrinkles, her eyes holding a deep, weary wisdom. Maria. The cook from the bar T was there. She had run from the ranch after the shooting, terrified, and had come here for shelter. He is here," Maria stammered, her eyes wide, as Tahan and Ada stepped from the shadows into the candlelight. "We are not here to harm you," Tahan said in Spanish, his voice gentle. "We are here for help." Ada, her own face still showing the marks of Silas's cruelty, stepped forward. She looked at Tomasa. "You saw me," she said, her voice quiet but strong. "You came 2 weeks ago, when he said I fell from the porch. You saw the bruises, the old ones." Tomasa's eyes flickered to the door, to the dark night outside. "I see many things, Mija, a woman falling, a horse kicking. It is the way of this land. It is the way of a monster," Ada countered, her desperation making her bold. "And the law is helping him. They say Tahan kidnapped me." "He saved you," Maria whispered, crossing herself. "I saw it." "We are going to Fort Worth," Tahan explained, stepping forward. "To a real court. We have the letters. We have Maria's eyes. We need your voice. Tomasa, we need you to tell the judge what you saw, that the bruises were old, that this was not the first time." The old woman's face, which had been wary, now hardened with real fear. "You ask me to do this. You ask me to speak against Silas Trammell. He owns this land. He owns the water. He owns the jobs. If I speak against him, my son, my grandchildren, they will have no work. They will starve. Or worse." It was an impossible thing to ask. Ada felt the hope in her chest shrivel. Tahan was silent for a long moment. He looked at the small, worried children sleeping on a pallet in the corner. "You are right," he said. "It is too much to ask." He reached into his pouch and pulled out a small string of silver coins, half his savings. "This is for a wagon and supplies. My Appaloosa is strong. I will take you and your son and his family. I will take you all south to the mission. Mother Isadora will find you land. You will be safe." He put the coins on the table. "And then you will tell the truth." Tomasa looked at the silver, then at Tahan's face. She saw no trick. She saw a hard promise. She nodded, her eyes filling with slow, pained tears. "My son will get the wagon. We will be ready by the new moon. I will testify." They left with the two women's words, a new, vital piece of their puzzle. Their next stop was Mobidi, a rowdy, wind-blown trading post that housed the regional post office. It was a 2-day ride, and the sky was turning yellow. The sandstorm hit them on the open prairie, a sudden, howling wall of red grit that blotted out the sun at 3 in the afternoon. It was a suffocator, a blind, raging beast of a wind. Tahan had only a few minutes' warning, the smell of ozone and iron in the air. He pulled Ada from the horse and shoved her, and himself, into a shallow washout, a mere dip in the landscape. It was not a cave, not a canyon. It offered almost no protection. "Stay down!" he yelled over the scream of the wind. "Cover your face! Do not breathe deep!" He pulled her against him, forcing her head down against his chest, and covered them both with his saddle blanket. The world was reduced to a roaring, stinging darkness. The wind sounded like a freight train, like 1,000 drums of war. The sand was not like sand. It was like tiny, sharp knives, stinging any exposed skin, finding its way through the heavy wool of the blanket. They lay like that for hours. Ada was terrified. It felt like being buried alive. This was a force that did not care about justice, or letters, or bruises. It was an elemental rage, and it was trying to erase them. She began to tremble, a deep, bone-rattling shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. "I am so afraid," she confessed, her voice muffled against his shirt. "All my life, I have been afraid, of being hungry, of being alone, of men like him. And now I will die here, in the dirt." Tahan held her, his arm tight around her, his own body taking the worst of the wind. His shoulder ached. His mouth was full of grit. "I am afraid, too," he said, the words torn from him, a confession he had never made. She stilled. I am afraid," he said, his voice a low rumble, "of failing. My grandmother, she saw the doe, the sign of protection. I see her, in my dreams, standing, and I'm afraid I am not strong enough to be what she saw." They were not a man and a woman. They were two small, terrified souls, huddled under a blanket, whispering their deepest fears to each other while the world tried to tear them apart. And in that howling darkness, something in Ada Whitlow shifted. She had been a piece of cargo, a victim, a runner. But this man, this warrior who had fought and bled for her, was afraid. He was afraid of failing her. He had chosen to stand for her. "We will not die here," she said, her voice no longer a whisper, but a raw statement of fact. She pushed her face from his chest and looked up, though all she could see was the dark, swirling grit. "He bought me, Silas. He bought me like a sack of flour, but he does not own me. Caleb tore my letter, but he did not tear my voice. This wind, it is just wind. We are still breathing." She was no longer Ada, the mail-order bride. She was Ada, the survivor. She was not a thing to be chosen. She was a woman who was choosing. She was choosing to live. When the storm finally passed, hours later, leaving a strange, pink twilight, they were alive. They were bruised, battered, and coated in a thick red paste of dust and sweat. But they were alive, and they were different. They rode into Mobiti the next day. It was a town that smelled of untanned buffalo hides, whiskey, and despair. The post office was a small, neat log building, a bubble of federal order in a sea of chaos. The postmaster was a young man named Eli. He was barely 20, with a thin mustache and a large, official-looking stamp on his desk. He looked at Tahan with open suspicion, and at Ada with a mixture of pity and fear. "We are here," Ada said, stepping to the counter, her papers in her hand, "to get a certified copy of a money order, sent from this office by Silas Trammell to a marriage broker in St. Louis." Eli's face went pale. I cannot give out private postal information, ma'am. It is against regulations." "Is it also against regulations?" Tahan said, stepping beside her, his hand resting on the counter, "for a man to sell a woman into backyard arrangements?" Eli flinched. He knew. Everyone knew. "My life is in danger," Ada said, her voice flat, no tears, no pleading. "My husband, as he calls himself, tried to have me killed. Your customer, Mr. Trammell, is a criminal. You have a record of that crime. It is in your book. We are taking that book to the federal court in Fort Worth, and you," she said, "will be a witness." The young man was trembling. He will kill me." "We are all in danger," Ada said, "but you are standing behind that stamp. You are the United States government. What is it for? If not for this—" Eli looked at her. He looked at Tahan. He licked his lips. He made his choice. He pulled the heavy, leather-bound ledger from under the counter. He found the page. He ran his finger down the column. "Here," he whispered. "Silas Trammell, to H. G. Wells, matrimonial services, $150, paid in full." He also found the record of the letters Silas had sent and received from the same address. He took a clean sheet of paper, dipped his pen, and copied the entry, line for line. He took Ada's letters from Silas and compared the handwriting to the ledger. "It is his hand," he said. He took his stamp, the one that said Mobiti, U.S. Postal Service, inked it, and pressed it hard onto the paper, leaving a clean, purple seal. "Certified," he said, his voice shaking. "A true copy." He handed it to Ada. He was Perhaps the bravest man they had met. They rode out of Mobiti with the truth in their saddlebag, a piece of paper that could undo a tyrant. That night, they needed shelter. The chase would be on them again. Fast. Tahan found an old, abandoned line shack, a half-collapsed stable with a roof that was more holes than shingles, but it was out of the wind. He tended the horse while Ada laid out their meager blankets. The air was cold, and they sat close, sharing the last of their jerky. The tension of the past few and a half days, the storm, the confrontation with Eli, had left them exhausted. "You were good today," Tahan said, his voice low in the dark. "With Eli, you were strong." "I was just telling the truth," she said. "It felt new." They sat in silence. He was a man of his people. She was a white woman from a city. By all the laws of their world, they should be enemies. Or he should be her rescuer, and she his grateful charge. But it was not like that. They were partners. "Tahan," she said, her voice hesitant. "When this is over, if we—" "What will happen?" He looked at her. The moonlight, coming through the broken roof, touched her hair, and the faint, new scar on her temple. "I do not know," he said, honestly. "I am a wanted man. You are free." "I am not afraid of you," she said. His hand was resting on the blanket between them. He had hard, calloused hands, hands that could fix a rifle, or set a snare, or be gentle. She reached out, her own hand small and pale in the darkness, and laid it on top of his. It was not a plea, it was not a request, it was a statement. "I am here, with you." He did not pull away. His fingers, rough and warm, slowly turned, and his hand closed around hers. It was the first time they had touched, not in violence, or in healing, or in desperation, but in simple, quiet, human connection. They just sat, holding hands, in the ruins of an old stable, and for a few hours, they were not hunted. The dawn came cold and sharp. Tahan was awake first, his hand still holding hers. He gently, very gently, released it. He rose and went to the broken doorway to read the morning. He stood for a full minute, his body perfectly still. "What is it?" Ada asked. Awake now, the fear returning. "Get the horse," he said, his voice flat. "All business. Now, do not pack, just saddle." He pointed. There, in a patch of soft alkali mud not 50 yards from the stable, was a fresh set of hoof prints. 3 horses. One of the prints was distinctive, a shoe on the left forehoof that was chipped. "Caleb," Tahan said. "He is close." Ada's heart hammered. "They are on us." "No," Tahan said, a strange, grim smile touching his lips. "They are not on us. They are ahead of us. They are checking the water holes, but they will double back. We have one chance." He grabbed his rope. He took the small brass bell he had on his saddle, the one to warn of snakes. He tied the bell to the end of the rope. He moved fast, his plan clear. He led the Appaloosa, with Ada on its back, into a thicket of mesquite. "Wait here," he said. He ran, crouching, to a low ridge, keeping the wind in his favor. He could see them, 3 riders, a mile away, coming back. He waited until they were in a draw. Then, he swung the rope, the bell tinkling, and threw it as far as he could into a wide, glistening white patch of ground to his left. It was an alkali flat, dry on the top, but a deep, sticky mud trap underneath. He then fired his rifle, the one with the flash hider, into the air, and ran. The riders, Caleb and the 2 Kansas men, heard the shot. They heard the tink-tink of the bell. They saw a figure running. "It is him," Caleb yelled. "He is running. He is on foot. He is driving a stolen cow." They fell for it. They spurred their horses, not toward Tahan, but toward the sound, toward the white flat. Tahan and Ada, from their hiding place, watched. The horses hit the alkali flat at a full gallop. For 10 yards, the crust held. Then it broke. The horses sank to their bellies in a thick, stinking, gray mud that was like quicksand. The animals screamed, trapped and terrified. The men were cursing, stuck, their hunt over, their day ruined. Tahan and Ada did not wait. They rode hard, heading south, putting miles between them and the sound of Caleb Rusk's rage. 2 days later, they met a freighter Tahan knew, a man who respected Mother Isadora. He had a message for them, a piece of news that turned their small victory to ash. A rider came from the settlement, the freighter said, his face grave. He said Marshal Deke is impaneling a grand jury. He is telling everyone you are a menace, and Silas Trammell has been buying drinks for every man in the county. He is stacking the jury. Son, he has bought them all. Your proof, that paper from Mobidi. It will not matter. They will not even let you speak in court. They will just vote to hang you. Ada's heart sank. Then it is over. We have lost. Tahan looked at the paper in his hand. The certified truth. He looked at the southern trail, toward Fort Worth, a trail that was now useless. He looked at Ada. No, he said, the court is closed, so we will make our own court. What do you mean? The freighter said Trammell is paying all his hands. The big payday. It is in 3 days. The whole town will be there, at the bar T for the celebration, for the return of his wife. He is throwing a party, Ada asked, sickened. He is throwing a party, Tahan said, his eyes cold and bright. He wants an audience. He is stacking his jury. Good. We will go. We will give his jury. And the whole town something to see. We will give them the truth. In public, where he cannot stop it. The sun was a white, hot coin in the center of the sky. It was high noon, the hour of no shadows and no mercy. The yard of the Bar T Ranch was thick with people. It was payday, and Silas Trammell liked to make a show of it. He had 2 kegs of beer set up, and a whole steer roasting over a pit. It was a celebration. He had told everyone, a party to welcome home his wayward wife. The hands were there, 50 or more of them, cowhands, wranglers, and fence riders, all waiting for their wages and their free beer. Marshal Deke was there too, standing on the porch of the main house, his tin star polished. He looked uncomfortable, his thumbs hooked in his belt. Silas Trammell stood beside him, a broad, triumphant smile on his face, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He was the king, and this was his court. Caleb Rusk was not on the porch. He was leaning against the corner of the stable, his arms crossed, his rifle resting in the crook of his arm. He was just watching, his gray eyes as flat and cold as a snake's. He and the 2 Kansas brothers were Silas's insurance. Bring her out, Silas boomed, his voice full of false good cheer. Let us welcome my wife home. A space was cleared. 2 of Silas's men were dragging Ada toward the center of the yard. She was not fighting, but her feet were dragging. They had her hands tied in front of her. They pushed her toward a heavy hitching post in the center of the yard, the same post they used for breaking difficult horses. My dear Ada, Silas said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You have had a terrible adventure. You were confused. You were led astray by a savage. But I am a forgiving man. Your home is here. Your duty is here. He nodded to his men. Tie her. We cannot have her running off again in her confusion. One of the men laughed, a coarse, ugly sound. He uncoiled a long length of rope. The crowd of cowhands was silent. They were here for money and beer. But this was turning sour. They shifted, their eyes dropping. This was a man's private business, but it was ugly business. And into that silence, a new sound came, the steady, unshod hoofbeats of a single horse. A ripple went through the crowd, and they parted. Tahan rode into the center of the yard. He was not running. He was not charging. He rode his Appaloosa at a slow, deliberate walk. He sat tall, his face a mask of stone, the repaired Winchester resting across his lap. His shoulder was bandaged, his hat was gone, and the wound on his own head was a raw, red line. He looked like a man who had ridden out of hell. But he was not alone. Behind him, riding on a borrowed mule, was Tomasa, the midwife, her face set in a look of grim determination, and behind her, on a second mule, was Eli, the young postmaster, his face pale with terror. But he was there. He was clutching a leather satchel. Tejan stopped his horse 10 feet from Ada. He did not look at Silas. He did not look at Caleb. He looked at the men in the crowd, his gaze moving from face to face. "I am Tahan," he said, his voice clear and loud, carrying over the silent yard. "You know me. I am a man of the Numunu. I am a hunter. I am not a thief." "You are a dead man," Caleb Rusk yelled from the stable, raising his rifle. "Mr. Rusk," Silas called out, holding up a hand, his smile widening. "Do not be hasty. This is entertainment. The savage has brought my wife back. He has even brought guests. Marshal, arrest this man." Marshal Deke took a step forward, his hand on his pistol. "Tahan, you are under arrest for kidnapping." Tahan ignored him. His eyes finally moved to Silas Trammell, who was still smiling on the porch. "This woman," Tahan said, his voice dropping, but with a new, hard edge, "is Ada Whitlow. She came from Missouri. She came for a home." He looked at Ada, who was standing, shaking, by the post. "She is not your wife, Trammell. She is not your property, and she is not an animal to be tied to a post." Silas's smile vanished. His face darkened. "She is what I say she is. This is my land. She is my wife. And you are nothing." He jabbed a finger at the man with the rope. "I said, tie her, now. And when you are done, tie him." The man with the rope, a large, rough hand, grabbed Ada's arm. She cried out. Tahan moved. He did not reach for his rifle. His hand went to his belt and pulled his tomahawk. He did not throw it at the man. He threw it at the rope. The heavy blade spun through the air, a blur of steel. It struck the hitching post. Not the man, not Ada. It struck the thick coil of rope the man was holding, severing it cleanly. The cut rope fell to the dust. The man holding Ada stared, his hand frozen, at the tomahawk handle, which was quivering in the wood, an inch from his fingers. "Step away from the post, Ada," Tahan said, his voice calm. Ada looked at the cut rope. She looked at Tahan. She looked at the man holding her, and she stepped. She took 2 steps away from the post, out of the shadow of the whip, and stood on her own, in the center of the yard. "I said do not shoot," Caleb Rusk snarled. "But I am tired of this." Caleb fired. The rifle crack was deafening. He was a good shot. He aimed for Tahan's heart. But Tahan had been waiting for it. The moment his tomahawk left his hand, he had dropped from his horse, pulling his Winchester with him. The bullet that would have killed him tore through the empty air where he had been a second before. He landed on his feet, in a crouch. He did not fire at Caleb. He fired at the base of a large brass oil lamp hanging from a post, the one they used for all-night poker games. The bullet struck the brass font. The lamp exploded, not in a fireball, but in a thick, choking black cloud of smoke and spraying kerosene. The wind, which had been still, caught the smoke and swirled it across the yard, blinding everyone. "Get him!" Caleb screamed, his eyes burning from the smoke, firing blind into the black cloud. Men were shouting. Horses were rearing. The crowd was surging, trying to get away from the gunfire. Caleb Rusk, his face a mask of rage, wiped his streaming eyes and lunged into the smoke, trying to find Tahan. He found someone. It was Ada. She had not run. She had a small bag of rock salt in her hand, the salt for the roasting steer. As Caleb burst from the smoke, She threw the entire handful, with all her strength, right into his face. He screamed, a high, thin sound of pure agony, dropping his rifle to claw at his eyes. My eyes, my eyes! In that same moment, a new sound cut through the chaos, the clear, frantic ringing of a bell. Mother Isidora, who had arrived with the freight wagon Tahan had sent for Tomasa, was at the small, adobe chapel on the edge of the Bar T compound. She was pulling the rope on the iron bell, ringing it as if the world was on fire. The sound brought the rest of the hands, the ones who had been in the bunkhouse, and the women from the cookhouse, all running into the yard. The crowd doubled, and they saw Ada Whitlow, standing in the middle of the yard, her face streaked with soot. They saw Caleb Rusk, on his knees, screaming, and they saw the dark, ugly, purple bruises that covered Ada's arms, the raw, red burn on her shoulder, visible through her torn dress. The murmuring in the crowd, which had been fearful, turned angry. Tahan stepped out of the smoke, his rifle held low. He was not a target, he was a judge. He walked past the blinded Caleb, past Ada. He walked directly to Marshal Deke, who was standing frozen on the porch. Eli, the postmaster, was right behind him, holding his satchel. Marshal, Tahan said, his voice ringing with an authority that Deke had never heard. This is a postal matter. What? Deke stammered. This? Eli said, his voice shaking, but he did not back down. He pulled the certified copy of the ledger from his bag. This is a copy of a federal postal money order, used by Silas Trammell to illegally purchase a woman. And these, he pulled out the letters, are his letters, proving his intent to commit fraud and kidnapping. Tahan took the papers from Eli. He shoved them into Marshal Deke's chest. Read them. Tahan said, What, now Read them, Tahan commanded, and his voice was so cold it silenced the yard. To the people. They are your jury. Read the evidence. Deke's hands were shaking. He looked at Silas. Silas's face was no longer red. It was a pale, waxy white. Marshal, Silas warned, his voice a low hiss. Deke unfolded the paper. It says, Record 1, $150, to H. G. Wells, matrimonial, He could not continue. He was sweating, his eyes darting from Tahan to Silas. Give me that, Silas roared. He had been exposed. His power, built on bluff and fear, was evaporating under the hot sun. He lunged from the porch and snatched the papers from Deke's hand. And, in a final, fatal mistake, he tore them to pieces. He tore the certified, legal, federal proof of his crime and threw the scraps to the dusty ground. The crowd gasped. Even the most ignorant man in that yard understood what he had just seen. Silas Trammell had just destroyed evidence in front of the law. You see, Silas screamed, his eyes wild, there is no proof, just the word of a savage and a whore, she is mine. Caleb Rusk had recovered. His eyes were on fire with pain, but he could see, he saw Tahan, his back to him. He saw his rifle on the ground. He dove for it. But Tahan had not forgotten him. He spun, his tomahawk, which he had pulled from the post, in his left hand, his long hunting knife in his right. They met in the center of the yard. It was not a gunfight, it was a brawl. Caleb was a brawler, strong and brutal, but Tahan was a warrior, fast and precise. Caleb swung the rifle like a club. Tahan ducked under it, and the tomahawk handle slammed into Caleb's elbow, striking the nerve. Caleb's arm went dead, and he dropped the rifle. Tahan did not stop. He moved in, the knife a blur, not to stab, but to disarm. He cut the pistol belt from Caleb's waist. He was disarmed. Tahan stepped back, his chest heaving. He had won. He did not kill. No! Silas screamed. He was a ruined man, and he knew it. He pulled his own pistol. a fancy pearl-handled revolver. He did not aim at Tahan, who was too far. He aimed at Ada, the source of all his trouble. He fired. The shot was wild, aimed in rage. It missed her, but it was close. It struck the wooden porch column just inches from Ada's head. The wood exploded. A cloud of sharp wooden splinters flew through the air. Ada screamed, throwing her hands up to cover her face. Tahan moved. He did not think. He lunged, his body covering hers, his back to the porch. He took the spray of wooden shards like a shotgun blast. He grunted in pain as a dozen sharp, splintered pieces of wood embedded themselves in his back and in his already wounded shoulder. He stood, shielding her, his arms around her. The yard was silent. He was bleeding. She was safe. Ada, who had been cowering, felt his arms around her. She felt him grunt in pain. She turned, still in his embrace. She saw the blood starting to soak his shirt, the splinters of wood protruding from his back. He had shielded her. He had taken the blow meant for her. She stood up straight, her fear gone, replaced by a cold, pure anger. She was still in his arms, but she was not hiding. She turned her head and looked at Silas Trammell, at Marshall Deek, at the entire watching crowd. And she reached down and she took Tahan's hand. She laced her fingers through his, her hand holding his, tight. "He is not the kidnapper," Ada said, her voice clear and strong, a bell that rang across the silent yard. "Silas Trammell is the criminal. This man saved me." She tightened her grip on his hand. A public, final, unbreakable bond. "I am not his property, and I am not a victim. I am a free woman, and I choose him." The stunned silence in the Bartee yard lasted for 3 heartbeats. It was broken by Silas Trammell's scream of pure, animalistic rage. He was a ruined man, and he knew it. He had been exposed, his power broken in front of his own men. "Kill them!" he shrieked, his face a purple mask, spittle flying from his lips. "Kill them both. I will pay $500. $500 to the man who brings me their heads." The crowd, which had been a stunned, angry mass, now became a greedy, dangerous one. $500 was a fortune. It was more than a man could make in 2 years. Marshall Deek, seeing his authority gone, his benefactor humiliated, finally acted. He raised his pistol. "Stop in the name of the law, stop." But Tahan was already moving. He grabbed Ada's hand. "Run!" He pulled her toward his Appaloosa. The horse was standing, reins trailing, still loyal. Tahan threw Ada onto its back, his wounded back screaming in protest. He vaulted up behind her, grabbing the reins. Caleb Rusk, his eyes still burning from the salt, had found his pistol. He raised it and fired, a wild, angry shot. The bullet tore a groove in the Appaloosa's rump, not a deep wound, but a stinging, hot pain. The horse screamed and bolted, not from control, but from pure terror. It was a lucky shot for them. The horse, maddened with pain, plunged through the scattering crowd, its sheer, uncontrolled speed clearing a path. They were out of the yard, the sound of shouting and gunfire erupting behind them. Tahan fought the horse, his arms aching, his back on fire, trying to regain control, to aim the animal's panic. "Where are we going?" Ada cried, clinging to his arm. "Red Draw," he yelled over the thunder of the hooves. "The land of my people. He can have the law. I will take the land." A posse formed fast. Greed was a quicker master than law. Caleb Rusk, his face a raw, red smear, was the first one in the saddle. He was joined by the 2 Kansas brothers and 5 of Trammell's most loyal and most brutal. Hands. 8 riders. 8 riders fueled by a $500 bounty. They were not a posse. They was a lynch mob on horseback. Tahan pushed the Appaloosa for miles, the lather on its coat turning pink with blood. He was not just running. He was running to a specific place. He led them into a maze of canyons, the rock walls rising up, sheer and red as fresh-cut meat. This was Red Draw. It was his land. He knew every twist, every hidden spring, every shadow. He finally slowed the horse, finding a narrow game trail that seemed to lead to a dead end. A solid wall of rock. But Tahan knew better. He dismounted, pulling Ada down with him. He led the horse behind a curtain of ancient, dry vines, into a hidden alcove, a pocket in the canyon wall that held a small, deep spring of clear, cold water. "We are safe here," Ada whispered, her voice shaking. "No," Tahan said, his voice grim. He was already pulling equipment from his saddlebag. "We are cornered. Now we fight. This is where they die. Or we do." He gave her no time to be afraid. He gave her tasks. "Take the water skins. Fill them. All of them." While she scrambled to the spring, he worked with a feverish, focused intensity. His back was a map of fire, the splinters of wood digging deeper with every movement. But he ignored it. He took his rope and moved into the canyon. He found a high, narrow spot on the trail they had used. Above it, a large boulder sat perched, held by a smaller keystone. He looped his rope, setting a deadfall trap. It was not meant to kill, but to block, to terrify. He moved back toward the spring, pulling a small, dried gourd from his bag. It was filled with pebbles. He tied it to a length of sinew, stringing it across the trail. A silent alarm. Then, from his bag, he pulled 2 polished steer horns. A rattle. He tied them to a long string, hiding himself in the rocks and stretching the string far across the canyon floor, the horns resting on a flat rock. When he pulled the string, the horns would rattle on the stone, a perfect imitation of a disturbed rattlesnake. It was a trick to make a man freeze, to make him look down, not up. Night fell. The canyon became a pit of black ink, the only light from a sliver of moon. Tahan and Ada sat in the dark, hidden in their stone pocket. The Appaloosa, its wound now cleaned, was hidden deeper in the cave. "They are coming," Tahan whispered. He did not need to hear them. He could smell the smoke from their torches. He left Ada in the cave. "Stay here. Do not make a sound. Use the derringer only if they are standing in front of you." He slipped out, a shadow among the rocks. He was the hunter now, not the hunted. The 8 riders were coming up the canyon, slow and wary. This was Tahan's territory, and even they, in their greed, were spooked. "He is in here," Caleb's voice echoed, cold and angry. "He has to be. Spread out. Check the side canyons." Tahan moved like the wind. He set a small decoy fire in a cleft of rock, a full 100 yards from their true hiding place. He piled it with wet leaves to make it smoke, a clear, foolish signal. "There!" one of the Kansas brothers yelled. "Smokey is over there!" The men, eager, broke formation and spurred their horses toward the fire. They rode right under his deadfall trap. Tahan waited. He let 3 of them pass. Then he pulled the keystone rope. The sound was a deep, rumbling groan, then a crash that shook the canyon walls. The massive boulder fell, landing on the trail with the force of a cannon. It did not hit anyone, but it sent rocks and shrapnel flying. The men screamed, wheeling their horses, panicked. "It is a trap. We are cut off." From the darkness, Tahan's new old Winchester spoke. The flash hider he had built worked. There was no bright muzzle blast, just a crack and the sound of lead hitting stone. He was not aiming for men. He was aiming for their canteens, their saddle horns. He was terrifying them. "He is up there!" a man shrieked, firing blind into the rocks. Tahan was already gone, moving to a new spot. Ada, in the cave, was shaking. She could hear the shouts, the gunfire. She felt useless, a piece of baggage. Then she heard a sound close by, a scrape, not from the canyon floor, but from above. Someone was on the rim, climbing, trying to get above them. She peered out. She could see nothing but the dark shape of the rocks, Then, a man's silhouette, black against the starry sky, moved on the ridge. He was directly above Tahan's last position. He was aiming down. He had not seen her. He was waiting for Tahan to fire again. Ada's heart stopped. She had the derringer. Tahan had told her, "Only when they are in front of you." This man was not in front of her, but he was in front of Tahan. Her hands, which had trembled when she learned, were suddenly steady. She raised the small pistol. It was a long shot, a desperate, impossible shot for a derringer. She did not aim for the man. She aimed at the rock just beside his head. She pulled the trigger. The derringer's pop was small, almost lost in the canyon, but the bullet, striking the rock, sent a spray of stone chips into the man's face. "Yeah!" he screamed, dropping his rifle and clutching his eyes. "I am hit! I am hit!" He stumbled back from the ledge, his cover blown. Down below, Tahan heard the small shot. He heard the scream. He did not know what had happened, but he knew that sound had saved his life. He used the distraction, firing twice more, then melting back toward his own cave. The posse had had enough. They were terrified. "He is a ghost!" one man yelled. "This is bad medicine!" "Get back!" Caleb's voice was a low snarl of fury. "Back to the mouth of the canyon. We will wait him out. He cannot stay in there forever." The sound of horses retreating echoed through the draw. Tahan slipped back into the alcove. Ada was there, shaking, the derringer still smoking in her hand. She stammered. "I saw him on the ridge. I think I missed." Tahan looked at her, his face unreadable in the dark. He took the small pistol from her hand. He looked at the spot on the ridge, now empty. He looked at her. "You did not miss," he said, his voice rough. "You saved my life." He sank to the ground, the adrenaline leaving him, the pain returning, 100 times worse. "They are gone," Ada whispered, relieved. "They are not gone," Tahan said, his teeth gritted. "They are just waiting. They know we are in here. We are trapped." He leaned his head back against the stone, a low groan escaping him. "You are hurt," Ada said, her voice sharp with a new fear. "The splinters." "It is not just the splinters," he said. He moved his left arm, and his shirt, soaked with fresh blood, pulled away from his skin. One of them got lucky. Before, in the yard, or maybe in the chase. I do not know." She looked. In the faint moonlight, she saw it. Below the old grays, below the splintered wood, there was a new, dark, weeping hole, a bullet in his shoulder, again. "Oh, God," she whispered. "It is not bad." He lied. "But it is deep." "We have to get it out," she said. Her panic was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "And the splinters, all of it." She took charge. "Water, the clean skins, and a fire, a small one. We need light." "A fire is death," he said. "Dying from a lead ball is also death," she retorted. "We will build it deep in the cave, where the smoke cannot be seen. I need light, and I need your knife heated." He watched her as she worked, her movements no longer hesitant. She was the one giving orders now. She built a tiny, almost invisible fire, using dry, smokeless wood from his pack. She laid him down, his chest on her lap, his back to the light. "This," she said, her voice trembling just once, "is going to hurt." For the next hour, the cave was a place of quiet, surgical agony. With the point of Tahan's hunting knife, she heated it in the flame, then cleansed it with whiskey from his flask. She began to pick the splinters from his back, each one a small, sharp, searing pain. He did not make a sound, but his body was rigid, the muscles knotted. Then, the bullet. It was deep, lodged against the muscle of his shoulder. She had to cut. Her hands were shaking. "I cannot," she whispered. the tears finally coming, hot and fast, blurring her vision. I cannot do this to you. Tahan reached up with his good hand, his arm moving behind him, and found her face. His fingers, rough and calloused, touched her wet cheek. "Ada," he whispered, his voice raw. "You are the strongest woman I have ever known. You faced Silas. You faced Caleb. You can do this. Your hands are steady." She took a deep breath. She let it out. She wiped her eyes. And his words. His belief made it true. Her hand stopped shaking. She cut. Tahan's body went rigid, a silent scream of agony. But he did not move. She found the small, misshapen piece of lead and pulled it free. Afterward, she was weak, her body shaking with the strain. She had saved him. She had taken his pain into her own hands. She washed the wounds. She took the small sewing kit from her own pocket, the one she used for mending her dress, with a clean needle and fine thread. Under the light of the moon that now streamed into the canyon, she began to stitch the worst of the cuts. She sewed his skin back together. It was an act of intimacy, a quiet, desperate, and profound act of love. When she was done, she had no bandages. She tore a long strip from her own petticoat, the last piece of her old life, and wrapped his body, binding his wounds. He was exhausted, his body on fire, but he was alive. She was kneeling in front of him. They were both stained with his blood. "You are," he started, but he had no words. She touched his face, her hand tracing the line of his jaw. "I will not leave you," she whispered, the words a vow. He leaned his forehead against hers, their breath mixing in the cold night air. "And I will not," he whispered back. "Leave you?" They stayed like that, just breathing, until the first gray light of dawn touched the canyon rim. Tahan was the first to move. He was weak, but his mind was sharp. "Dawn," he said. "Caleb will not wait. He will try something smart." He pulled himself to the mouth of the cave, his new stitches pulling. He scanned the canyon rim, the rocks now turning from gray to pink. He saw nothing. "He is not there," Ada said. "He is there." Tahan said, "He is just not where we are looking." He thought. He split the men. He sent half to the mouth, to make noise. He is taking the other half up, over the top, to flank us from behind. Tahan knew the land. There was one other way into this pocket, a high, narrow, dangerous goat trail. Caleb would find it. "He is smart," Taha said, "but he does not know this rock." From his pack, Tahan pulled a small, waxed canvas pouch. It held black powder. He pulled a long fuse. "It is a risk," he said, "but it is our only one." He left Ada. He scrambled up the rocks, his body on fire with pain, to a place where the narrow goat trail passed under a hollow overhang of rock. He packed the powder deep into the hollow, set the fuse, and waited. He did not wait long. He heard them, the scrape of a boot, a dislodged pebble. It was Caleb, leading the two Kansas brothers, their faces set, their rifles ready. Tahan lit the fuse. He did not run, he just dropped flat, 20 yards away. Caleb saw the fuse. He saw the spark. "Back!" he roared. The explosion was not large, but it was precise. The hollow rock, the overhang, shattered. Tons of rock and sand slid down, not in a great avalanche, but in a thick, choking, impassable slide. It did not kill anyone. The Kansas brothers had jumped back, but the goat trail was gone. It was just a sheer, impassable cliff of new, raw, broken stone. Caleb Rusk was on the wrong side. He was trapped on the high ledge, cut off from his men. Tahan climbed up, his Winchester in his hand. He walked along the rim until he was standing opposite Caleb, a 30-foot chasm of broken rock between them. They just looked at each other. Two men, two warriors, trapped. "You are good, Comanche," Caleb called out, his voice hoarse. He was not angry. He sounded tired. "You are very good." "It is over, Rusk." Tahan said, "Go home." Caleb laughed, a short, bitter bark. "Home, you think this is about your $50 bounty? You are a fool." 500. Tahan corrected him. Caleb's face twisted. He said 500, that lying. He spat. He told us 200. He lies to everyone. "What is this about, then?" Tahan asked. Caleb's eyes were full of a strange, cold fire. "It is about her. You think he wanted a wife? You think he went to all this trouble for a simple mail-order bride?" He stepped to the edge of the chasm, his eyes boring into Tahan's. "He had a partner, a man in Abilene, runs a high-class establishment. This was a test run. Silas was not going to keep her. He was going to sell her. He was going to sell her to a whorehouse, Tahan, for $1,000. He was just breaking her in for the new owner." Tahan's blood went cold. He looked down the canyon to where Ada was hidden, watching. He hoped she could not hear. Caleb was in a fury now. His own pride, his own code, violated. "He played me. He played you. He played her. Caleb was too close to the edge. The rock, shattered by the blast, was unstable. It crumbled under his boot. He did not fall. He slid. He tried to catch himself, but his hands found only loose gravel. He was sliding, his body half over the edge, a 200-foot drop to the canyon floor. He clawed at the rock, his eyes wide, the anger replaced by a sudden, stark, animal terror. "No!" he screamed. Tahan did not hesitate. He threw his rifle down. He ran. He jumped the chasm, a feat that should have been impossible for a wounded man. He landed hard, his boots skidding. He fell, half sliding himself, and he grabbed. He caught Caleb's wrist. He caught the wrist of the man who had shot him, the man who had hunted him, the man who would have killed him. Their positions were reversed. Tahan was on the solid rock. Caleb was dangling, his entire weight held by Tahan's one good arm. Caleb stared up, his face pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. He saw the man he had called a savage, the man he had tried to murder, his face a mask of pain, his arm shaking with the strain. He saw Tahan's jaw clench, the muscles in his neck cording. He was holding. "Why?" Caleb choked out. Tahan did not answer. He just held on, his feet sliding, his own wounds screaming, his body threatening to fail. From a ledge, 50 yards away, Ada watched. She had climbed up to see. She saw it all. She saw Caleb slip. She saw Tahan jump. She saw her man, the man she had just sewn back together, the man who had every reason to let go. Hold on. She saw him, his face a mask of agony, choose to save the life of his own murderer. He was not just a survivor. He was not just a warrior. He was a good man, the best man she had ever known. Tahan, with a final, groaning effort, pulled. He hauled Caleb, sputtering and choking, back over the edge. They both collapsed on the rock, panting, their chests heaving. Caleb Rusk, the bounty hunter, the killer, looked at the Comanche. He was shaking. He was a changed man. Before he could speak, a new sound came from the canyon below. A horn, a cavalry horn. Tahan and Ada both froze. From the mouth of the canyon, Marshal Deke was riding in, this time with a tattered flag. He was not just a marshal now. He was a field judge. "Tahan!" he yelled, his voice echoing off the rocks. "By the authority of the territory of Texas, I am convening a field court. You are to stand trial for kidnapping, for attempted murder, for insurrection, surrender, or we will burn you out." The bad news had arrived. The law, bought and paid for, was here to finish the job. They were trapped between a lynch mob and a kangaroo court. The trial was a farce. It was not held in a courthouse, but in the town's largest saloon. the long bar covered with a dusty canvas sheet to give it the appearance of dignity. It smelled of stale beer and fear. The room was packed, shoulder to shoulder, with every man from the bar T, every merchant who depended on Silas's business, and every curious soul for 50 miles. Tahan and Ada were marched in, not as witnesses, but as prisoners. Tahan's hands were bound, the fresh stitches on his back and shoulder pulling with a white, hot pain. Ada was not bound, but she was flanked by 2 deputies, as if she were the one on trial. On a raised platform sat Marshal Deke, and beside him, a man Ada had never seen. He was an older man, thin and weary, in a black, mud-splattered suit. This was Judge Amos Reed, a traveling circuit judge who had, by sheer chance, arrived in town that morning, following the news of the uprising. His presence was the only thing that had stopped a summary hanging at the canyon. Silas Trammell was there, not as a defendant, but as the chief accuser. He sat at a front table, his face cleaned, his arm in a sling he had put on for sympathy. Beside him sat a lawyer from Austin, a man named Stovall, who had a silver tongue and no conscience. The jury was, as Tahan had feared, a collection of Silas's men. The foreman was the same man who had tried to tie Ada to the hitching post. "We are here," Judge Reed began, his voice surprisingly strong, "to hear the matter of the territory versus Tahan, a Comanche, and to determine the proper custody of one Ada Whitlow, property of Silas Trammell." Property, the word hung in the air, a legal chain. "We will hear from the accuser," the judge said, nodding to Silas. Lawyer Stovall stood up. He was smooth. He painted a picture of a pastoral, peaceful life at the bar T. He spoke of a kind, generous husband. He spoke of a confused, hysterical, and ungrateful wife. And then he spoke of Tahan. He called him a savage, a murderer, an animal who had preyed on this poor, confused woman and filled her head with lies, kidnapping her for his own unchristian purposes. He spoke for 20 minutes, and with every word, he hammered nails into Tahan's coffin. "The prosecution calls Marshal Deke." Stovall said. Deke, his face pale and sweating, took the stand. He recounted the events, twisting them. He spoke of Tahan's violent trap at the creek. He spoke of the ambush at the bar T, the riot Tahan had incited. He did not mention the torn papers. He did not mention Ada's bruises. He was a man digging his own grave with the lies. "And now," Judge Reed said, his eyes on Tahan, "the defense. Do you have a statement? Tahan." Tahan stood. His back was a column of fire. "I am not a lawyer," he said, his voice quiet, but it carried in the silent room. "My words are simple. This is not about kidnapping. This is about a crime committed by Silas Trammell." "Objection!" Stovall shouted. "Slander!" "Overruled," the judge said, his eyes curious. "Let him speak. Who are your witnesses?" "I call," Tahan said, his voice clear, "Mother Superior Isidora." A gasp went through the room. Mother Isidora, her black robes a stark contrast to the saloon's grime, walked to the front. She was the one person in the room Silas could not intimidate. "Do you know this man, Silas Trammell?" Tahan asked. "I know his reputation," she said, her voice like cold steel. "It is one of greed and cruelty." "Objection. Overruled. And I know this woman, Ada Whitlow. She came to my mission. She was ill." "What was wrong with her?" Tahan asked. "She had a bullet graze on her head. She had a burn on her shoulder, deep and foul. She had older bruises, many of them, on her arms, her back, her ribs. This was not an accident. This was the work of a beast." The jury looked at their boots. Stovall was on his feet, shouting, but the judge waved him down. "I call Tomasa, the midwife." Tahan said. Tomasa walked up, her small, dark frame trembling. But her eyes were on Tahan. She spoke in Spanish, and Tahan translated, his words simple and direct. "Did you see Ada Whitlow before I took her?" Yes, Silas Trammell. He called me. He said she was clumsy. But I am a midwife. I have seen this before. Old bruises, yellow and purple, a broken rib from weeks ago. He hit her many times. He is a wife-beater." The crowd was murmuring now, the tide of their opinion shifting. "I call Eli." Tahan said. Eli, the young postmaster, walked up, clutching his leather satchel as if it were a shield. He was shaking. "Tell them," Tahan said. I am a federal employee." Eli stammered. I will not be party to a crime." He looked at Silas, his fear warring with his duty. Duty 1. He pulled out his ledger. He held up the certified copy Tahan had left with Mother Isadora, the one Silas thought he had destroyed. "I have the originals." Eli said, "A postal money order. From Mr. Trammell. To a matrimonial service. This was not a marriage, Your Honor. It was a purchase, and I have the letters. His letters. Proving he was procuring her." "This is an outrage," Stovall roared. This is inadmissible. This is a conspiracy." "This," Silas Trammell said, standing up, his voice a low, confident growl, "is a lie. A wonderful, elaborate lie. But I have the only thing that matters." He nodded to Stovall. Stovall, with a flourish, pulled a new, crisp document from his briefcase. "Your Honor," Stovall said, "the defense, if you can call it that, rests on a fantasy. The fact is that Ada Whitlow is the legal, wedded wife of Silas Trammell. We have the marriage certificate, filed in Austin, 6 months ago." He handed it to the judge. It was perfect. It had a gold seal. It was signed. It was dated. It proved, in the eyes of the law, that everything Tahan and Ada had said was a lie. If they were married 6 months ago, all the letters, the money orders, they were just irrelevant. A cold, dead silence fell on the room. Tahan had lost. The judge looked at the paper. He looked at Ada. "Mrs. Trammell," he said, his voice kind. "This is a legal document. It seems to clear this matter up." Ada was staring at the paper. She had been defeated. She was his property. But then she looked closer. She saw the date. She saw the seal. "No," she whispered. "Speak up," the judge said. "No," Ada said, her voice stronger. She walked to the judge's bench, pushing past the deputy. She pointed. "This is a lie. This paper. This is a lie." "How do you know?" Stovall sneered. "The date," Ada said, her mind racing, faster than it ever had. "It says March 5th, 1860. That was the day of the great blizzard. Back in Missouri. I could not have been here." "A blizzard," Stovall scoffed. "She is hysterical." "And the seal," Ada said, her voice rising, finding its power. "The seal. It is from the territorial office, but the stamp, the ink, it is the same. It is the same purple ink that Eli uses at the post office. It is not an Austin seal. It is Eli's Mobeetie post office stamp. Just smudged." The room went dead silent. Eli, at the back, looked as if he was going to faint. "And," Ada said, her voice ringing, "the signature, Silas G. Trammell. He told me, when he was drunk, he told me he cannot write. He can only make an X. His lawyer, in Austin, handles all his papers." Silas Trammell, who had been sitting, smiling, was now standing. He was not smiling. He had been caught by her. "This court," Judge Reed said, his voice like a gavel. "Finds this document highly irregular." "Irregular," Silas bellowed. "Irregular, I will show you irregular." The saloon doors burst open. It was Caleb Rusk. He was not the same man. He was not wearing his guns. His arm was in a sling. His face was a map of raw salt burns. He looked broken. He walked to the center of the room. He looked at Tahan. He looked at Ada. He looked at Silas. "Your Honor," Caleb said, his voice a low, rough rasp. "My name is Caleb Rusk. I am a bounty hunter." "Mr. Rusk," Silas warned, his hand moving toward his coat. "Shut up, Silas," Caleb said. He did not yell. It was a command. "I was hired," Caleb said to the judge, "by Silas Trammell, first to hunt Tahan for a bounty, then for $500, to murder him. I was there. I was in the yard. I saw it all. Mother Isadora, Tomasa. They are telling the truth. Eli is telling the truth." The room was not breathing. "This man, Silas Trammell," Caleb continued. "He ordered me to rough up the woman. He told me to create evidence. He told me to lie to the marshal. I am the one who shot at them. I am the one who grazed her head. I am the one Tahan. I am the one he could not say it. He could not say saved me. That paper," Caleb pointed to the forged certificate, "is a lie. And he pointed to Silas, is a liar, a slaver, and a coward. I have hunted men for a living, but he is the only animal I see in this room. I am done." It was over. Silas Trammell was a dead man. His reputation, his power, all of it, gone, in one confession. Silas knew it. He did not shout. He did not scream. He moved. He pulled the pearl-handled revolver, but he did not aim at Caleb. He did not aim at Tahan. He aimed at the box of evidence, at the letters, at the ledger. He fired. The shot was deafening in the small room. The pine box of evidence exploded. Papers, lit by the muzzle flash, burst into flame. "Fire!" someone screamed. It was the diversion, in the smoke, in the panic, as men scrambled. Silas lunged. He grabbed Ada. He put the hot barrel of his gun to her head. "Back!" he roared. "All of you back, we are leaving." He dragged her, as a shield, toward the saloon doors. Tahan moved, but Stovall and the deputies, still loyal, blocked his path. Silas kicked open the doors and dragged Ada into the street. The world had changed. The hot, bright sun was gone. While they had been in the saloon, the sky had turned a dark, bruised purple. The first great storm of the season, the one the land had been crying for, had arrived. The wind was howling, and a cold, driving rain was falling, not in drops, but in solid, gray sheets. "Let her go! Silas!" Tahan yelled, bursting through the doors. He was alone. "Stay back, savage!" Silas screamed. His gun jammed against Ada's temple. He was trying to get to his horse. "It is over," Tahan said. He stood in the middle of the street, the rain plastering his bloody shirt to his body. He was defenseless. And then he slowly, deliberately, unstrapped his knife belt. He let it fall with his tomahawk into the mud. He was unarmed. "You see," he said to Silas, his voice carrying over the wind, "I have no weapons. It is just you and her." "You are a fool," Silas laughed, a crazy, wet sound. "I will still kill you. I will kill you both." "You cannot," Tahan said. He was walking toward him, slowly, his hands open at his sides. "I have the gun." "You have a gun," Tahan said. "But you have no power. You do not own her. You cannot own her. My people, we have a law. It is older than your paper. It is older than your towns. No one can own the breath of another. Her breath is her own. You cannot take it. You cannot buy it. and you cannot stop it." Silas was confused. The man was walking at him. He was talking in riddles. "Stop!" Silas shrieked, his hand tightening, his finger taking up the slack on the trigger. The world lit up. A crack of lightning, blue and white, split the sky, striking the metal weather vane on the saloon. The thunder was not a rumble. It was a single, violent, bone-shattering crack. In that flash, another sound, a single sharp bang. Silas Trammell's gun did not fire. He stood, his eyes wide, looking at his hand, his gun hand. There was a small, neat hole in his wrist. His fingers, numb, opened. The pearl-handled revolver fell into the mud. He looked up. Marshal Deke was standing on the boardwalk, his own pistol smoking, the rain washing the sweat from his pale, resolute face. He had finally, in the last moment, done the right thing. Silas howled, a sound of animal pain. In that 1 second, his grip on Ada loosened. She did not wait. She did not scream. She saw the knife, the one Tahan had dropped, lying in the mud. Just 2 feet away. She was still tied. She dove for it. She grabbed the handle, the rawhide still warm from his body. And as Silas lunged for her, she rose, and she cut the ropes that bound her own hands. She was free. She had saved herself. Silas Trammell looked at her. He looked at the smoking pistol of the marshal. He looked at the unarmed Tahan. He was surrounded, bleeding and beaten. He sank to his knees in the mud, holding his shattered wrist. And for the first time, he wept. Tahan and Ada just stood, the rain washing the blood and the grime from them. They were breathing. Back in the saloon, the fire was out. The evidence was gone, but it did not matter. Judge Amos Reed stood at his bench. "This field court is resumed," he said. He looked at Silas, now in cuffs. He looked at Ada, standing tall, Tahan at her side. "In the matter of Ada Whitlow," the judge said, "I declare the fraudulent marriage certificate null and void. She is a free woman. In the matter of Silas Trammell," he continued, his voice hard, "I am binding him over for federal trial in Fort Worth, for fraud, for kidnapping, for assault, and for attempted murder. And in the matter of Tahan," the judge said, his eyes meeting the Comanche's, "all warrants are rescinded, all charges are dismissed. You are free to go." The rain had come. The land and the law had been cleansed. They did not stay in the town. The rain had washed the street clean, but the saloon still smelled of burnt paper and betrayal. Judge Reed had offered Tahan a room at the hotel, a mark of respect, but Tahan had refused. He and Ada walked to the livery, Tahan's arm still bound, his back a stiff board of pain. They retrieved the Appaloosa, its rump wound already healing, and they rode out. They rode back to the place where it had all begun, the small, hidden sanctuary at Cottonwood Creek. It was not a place of fear anymore. It was a place of new beginnings. The rain had filled the creek. The trickle was now a strong, clear stream. Nearby, Tahan knew of a place, a small hot spring that bubbled up from the rock, steaming in the cool, rain-washed air. "Here," Tahan said, sliding from the horse. "This is a good place. The water is warm. The earth is good." They did not have a house. They had a saddle blanket, a rifle, and each other, but they had a future. They started with nothing, and they built everything. Tahan, despite his wounds, was a worker. He cut sod from the creek bank. He found fallen cottonwood, seasoned and strong. He built a small house, not a dugout, but a cabin. It was small, just one room, but the walls were thick, and it was warm. He built a fireplace from river stones. Ada worked beside him. She, who had only ever known the gray of a city and the dirt of the bar tea, found a strength in her own hands. She chinked the logs with mud and grass. She learned to mix a whitewash from caliche rock, and she made the inside walls a clean, bright white. And while Tahan built the walls, Ada built the future. She took a small spade Tahan fashioned from a piece of tin, and she broke the ground. She turned over the rich, dark soil near the spring, and from a small cloth bag she had guarded, a bag she had brought all the way from Missouri, she took a handful of seeds. She planted her garden, sunflowers. The town they had left behind was also healing, also rebuilding. The trial had been a fire, and it had burned away the sickness. Marshal Deke. His one act of bravery, not enough to erase a lifetime of cowardice, turned in his badge. He packed a single bag and rode out of town. Heading west, a man looking for a place where he was not known. The town, free of Silas's shadow, held an election. They chose a new sheriff, a young, honest rancher who had spoken up for Tahan at the trial, a man who believed the law should be a shield, not a club. Of Caleb Rusk, there was little word. He had vanished from the saloon after his testimony, a ghost in the rain. But a week later, when Tahan rode into the settlement for flour and salt, there was a package waiting for him at the new sheriff's office. It was not a package, but a small, heavy piece of canvas. Inside was a box of 100 new brass rifle cartridges, a good whetstone, and a single folded piece of paper. The paper was blank, except for 4 words, scratched out in a rough, angry hand. I owe you one. It was not a promise of friendship. It was a marker, a debt from one warrior to another. Tahan knew that somewhere, in the hard lands to the west. He had an ally, a man as dangerous and as complicated as the land itself. Ada's healing was of a different kind. Her scars were fading, the one on her temple a thin, white line, the burn on her shoulder a puckered, red map of pain. But the scars inside were deeper. She found her own way to heal. She went to Eli, at the post office, and she bought paper and stamps. She began to write letters. She wrote to the Matrimonial Gazette in St. Louis, telling them the truth of Silas Trammell. She wrote to the federal marshal in Fort Worth, giving her testimony again, in case other women had filed complaints. And then, she began to write to the women themselves. She got the addresses from Eli, the names of other women who had written to marriage brokers. Her letters were simple, clear, and strong. My name is Ada Whitlow, she wrote. I came here as a mail-order bride, and I was sold into slavery. I am writing to tell you the truth. Do not come without a round-trip ticket. Do not sign any paper you do not understand. Demand that your letters be filed with a federal court, and know that you have the right to say no. She was planting seeds of a different kind, seeds of warning, of freedom, of rebellion. When their house was built and the garden was planted, Tahan took her on a journey. He had healed. His back was stiff, and the shoulder would always ache in the cold. But he was whole. Where are we going? She asked, as he helped her onto the Appaloosa. To a place of thanks, he said. He took her north, a 2-day ride, to the sacred hills of his people, the medicine mounds. They were 4, low, flat-topped hills, rising from the flat prairie like sleeping giants. They were a place of power, a place where the spirits of the earth came to speak. They climbed the highest mound at sunset, the red rock warm under their hands. The whole world was spread out below them, a sea of grass, purple and gold in the fading light. This is where I saw the dream, Tahan said, his voice quiet. The night I saw you in the yard, I dreamed of this place, and I dreamed of a doe. She was standing right here. He pointed to a spot at the edge of the mesa. My grandmother said the doe is a sign. It means a man must protect. Ada looked at him, his strong profile against the vast, empty sky. She was right. You did. No, Tahan said, turning to her. I was wrong. I thought the dream meant I had to be a shield. I thought it was about my strength. He shook his head. I stood in the rain, in the street. I dropped my weapons. And you cut your own ropes. Ada, you did not need a shield. You needed a witness. He bent down and picked up a small, perfectly white, smooth stone. He placed it at the spot where he had seen the doe. It was an offering, a prayer of thanks, not for his own strength, but for hers. They rode back to their small cabin by the creek, and they were not alone for long. The world, which had been so large and empty, began to fill. Maria, the cook, and Tomasa, the midwife, had been given a small plot of land by the new town council, land seized from the Bar T, but it was too close to the old memories. Tahan invited them to build near the cottonwood. They came, with their families, their sons, their grandchildren. They built small, neat adobe houses a quarter-mile down the creek, and they brought life. They brought chickens and goats and children who laughed. Maria and Tomasa, with a small loan from Mother Isadora, opened a cantina, a small kitchen in a lean-to. They sold fresh bread, hot beans, and strong coffee to the freighters and ranchers who now used the cleaner, safer trail. A community, a small, vibrant, multicolored community, was born on the banks of the creek. Life took on a new rhythm. It was a rhythm of work and of learning. Ada, who had only ever known English, found herself surrounded by the soft, flowing sounds of Spanish and the sharp, guttural, beautiful words of the Numunu. She began to learn. Tahan was her teacher. He would point, his hand on the horse. "This," he would say, "is Tua." She would point to the sky. "What is that?" "That," he would smile, "is Tumamap." He taught her the words for water, for fire, for love. And she taught him. She brought back a stack of old newspapers from town and a child's primer. Silas, she said, could not write his name. He was a king who could not read. You will be different. He was a reluctant student. He could read the land, the sky, the heart of a deer. He did not see the need for the black crawling marks on paper. "We have a house," she said, "but we do not have the land. Not on paper. The new law, the Homestead Act, says a man can have land if he can improve it, and if he can sign his name to the deed." She looked at him, her blue eyes serious. "I want this to be ours. I want a paper, a white man's paper, that says Silas Trammell can never, ever touch this place." So he learned. He sat by the fire at night, his large, calloused hands fumbling with a piece of chalk and a small slate. He, who could track a mountain lion across bare rock, struggled to form the letters. She was a patient teacher. She would guide his hand, her own small hand over his. First, he learned the letters T-A-H-A-N. Then, he learned the words water, house, horse, Ada. The day came when he took a piece of paper and a pen, and he wrote his name, Tahan. It was strong, clear, and The sunflowers in Ada's garden grew tall, their bright yellow faces turning, just as she had said, to follow the light. One evening, as the sun was setting, Tahan came to her. He was holding two things. In one hand, he had a small, tight, beautiful braid of sweetgrass. It scent clean and holy. In the other, he had a bowl of roasted corn, a food of his people. "We have a house," he said. "We have the land. We have a name. But we are not one." Ada looked at him. "Tahan." "In my way," he said. "A man and a woman, they share the smoke. They share the food. They become a family. In your way. You have papers and a man in a black coat." "Yes," she whispered. "I want both," he said. "I want it all for you." They were married on a bright, clear day in October, when the cottonwoods were a brilliant yellow. It was not a wedding of the town. It was a wedding of their new, small, strong world. They stood by the creek, by the hot spring. Mother Isadora came from the mission. She stood, her wooden cross in her hand, and she read from her book. her voice clear in the quiet air. She blessed them in the name of her God, a God of mercy and of sanctuary. Then, Tahan's grandmother, who had come from the north, her face a beautiful map of 100 winters, came forward. She took the braid of sweetgrass. She lit it, and the sacred, sweet smoke wafted over them. She chanted a low, soft song, a song of blessing, of endurance, of family. She gave them the bowl of roasted corn, and they fed it to each other, a promise to always provide, to always nourish. They stood between two worlds, their hands joined. They were not Comanche, not white. They were not fugitive, not victim. They were just Tahan and Ada, a family, built not on paper, not on law, but on a promise, made of respect, and sealed in a trial of fire. The rains of that first season gave way to the high, hot sun of summer. The sunflowers in Ada's garden grew tall, their heavy, bright heads following the light. A wall of yellow hope at the edge of their cabin. The news from Fort Worth came in late July. It was carried by the same freight driver who had always respected Tahan, a man who now stopped at Maria's cantina for coffee on every run. He brought a newspaper, weeks old, but the ink was black and final. Silas Trammell's trial had been a federal matter, and the judge had shown no mercy. With the testimony of the judge who had run the field court, and the clear, undeniable records from the post office, the case was absolute. Silas was convicted. The list of his charges was long federal mail fraud, assault and battery, arson for the burning of the evidence in the saloon, and the most serious charge, conspiring to deprive a United States citizen of her rights and liberty. He was sentenced to 20 years in the federal prison at Huntsville. His empire, the Bar T, was seized. The federal marshals broke it up. The judge ordered that the land be sold, and that the proceeds, every single dollar, be used to pay the back wages of the men Silas had cheated for years. The iron grip of the Bar T was broken, its name turning to dust and a bad memory. With the law settled, Tahan's place in the world, which had always been on the edge, shifted to the center. He was no longer the outsider. He was the man who had faced down Silas, the man who had used the law when the law itself was corrupt. Eli, the postmaster, rode out to the cabin, not with fear, but with a job offer. The United States Postal Service needed a permanent scout for the new route, a man who could guide the mail riders through the hard panhandle, a man who knew the water, the weather, and the shortcuts. Tahan was suspicious. "I do not work for a paper," he said. "That takes land from my people." "This paper does not take," Eli said. He unfolded the contract. He was a good man, and he had learned, "Read it, or I will read it to you." Tahan looked at the paper, then at Ada, who smiled. He took it. His reading was slow, but it was strong. He read the words aloud. He was to be paid $50 a month, a good wage, but it was the other clause that he cared about. It was a map. "The route," Eli explained, "must respect the local landmarks." He had drawn the route himself, and it made a wide, respectful circle around the medicine mounds. The contract stated that the guide, Tahan, had the final authority to alter the route based on weather, safety, or sacred ground. It was respect. It was the white man's world learning to bend, learning to see. Tahan took the pen from Eli. He signed his name, his own name, to his own contract. Ada's work, which had begun with letters of warning, grew. Women wrote back to her. They sent stories, whispers of fear, questions about their own rights. The cantina at Cottonwood Creek became more than a place for food. It became a meeting hall. On Tuesday afternoons, Ada held a class. At first, it was just Maria and Tomasa, and two other women from the small settlement. Ada taught them what she had taught Tahan. She taught them their letters. But she taught them more. She brought the old, crumpled, torn copy of the contract Silas had used. "This," she said, "is the word property. This is the word obedience. This is what we must look for." She taught them how to read a deed, She taught them about inheritance laws. She taught them how to go to the postmaster and file their own complaints, how to make their voices a federal matter. She, who had been a piece of purchased goods, was now teaching other women how to never be for sale. Their own life took on a quiet, strong rhythm. It was a life of hard work, of shared burdens, and of deep, unspoken peace. One night, months after the trial, a cold autumn rain hammered against the sod roof of their cabin. The wind howled, but inside, the stone fireplace Tahan had built held a steady, warm blaze. The cabin smelled of pine smoke, wet wool, and the rich scent of a rabbit stew Ada had simmering. Tahan had been scouting the new postal route all day, and the cold rain had seeped into his bones. His old wounds ached. He sat on the hearth, his back to the fire, his shirt off. Ada came to him. She had a small bowl of warm salve, a mixture of willow bark and bear grease that Tomasa had taught her to make. She knelt behind him and began to work the salve into his skin. His back was a map of their story. The white, puckered scar from the bullet graze. The deeper, ragged star where she had cut the lead out of his shoulder. Her own stitching still visible. And, fanned across his back like the trace of angel wings, were the dozens of small, silvery scars from the wooden splinters he had taken when he shielded her from Silas's last, desperate shot. Her hands were gentle, but firm, working the warmth into the sore muscles, easing the ache of the ride. He sat in silence, his head bowed, the tension of the day leaving him with every stroke of her hands. When she was finished, she did not move away. The firelight played over his strong back, and she was filled with a tenderness so deep it ached. She leaned forward, her hair falling around her face, and she pressed her lips to the largest scar, the one on his shoulder. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of thanks. It was a kiss that read every line of his sacrifice, and honored it. He turned, his good arm coming around her waist, pulling her close. He looked at her, at the thin, white line on her temple, the scar from Caleb's bullet. He traced it, his rough finger a gentle contrast to her soft skin. He saw the line that had almost taken her from him. He leaned forward and pressed his own lips to it. A promise, a vow, a prayer of gratitude. They did not speak. They held each other on the thick woven blanket, their blanket, in their home. The rain drummed on the roof, a safe, enclosing sound. They were alive. They were whole. She rested her head on his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. "Tahan," she whispered into the darkness. "I am here," he rumbled, his voice a vibration against her ear. "Our world, it feels so full, with Maria and Tomasa and the children at the cantina." She hesitated, then found her courage. "This house is a good, strong house, but it is small." He stroked her hair, a slow, understanding smile spreading across his face in the dark. "Yes, we can build another room, in the spring." She smiled, her face pressed against his warm skin. "Yes, a room, for a child, for a son, with his father's brave eyes, or a daughter, with her father's strong spirit." He held her tighter, his heart so full he thought it might break. He, who had been a lone runner, a man of the edges, a man who had expected nothing. He saw a future he had never, ever dared to dream of. A family, a continuation. "Yes," he whispered back, his voice thick with an emotion he did not name. "Yes, a room, in the spring." A week later, Mother Isadora made the long journey from her mission. She came on the freight wagon, and she brought a gift. It was the large, cracked, heavy wooden cross that had hung in her chapel, the very cross where she had hidden Tahan's wanted poster. "Its work in my chapel is finished," she said, her wise eyes smiling. "I believe it belongs here now." Tahan took it. The wood was heavy, seasoned by 100 years of faith. He knew just where it belonged. He did not hang it inside. He hung it above their door, on the outside, where the rain and the sun could touch it. It was a symbol, justice, which had been hidden and buried, was now brought out into the light, washed clean by the rain, and it stood as a guardian over their home. The seasons turned, the hard winter passed, and they were warm. Spring came, and the creek ran high with melted snow, and the grass returned, a violent, beautiful green. Tahan was walking by the water's edge at dawn, checking a snare line. The air was cool and new. He stood still, a part of the landscape, and he saw her. On the far bank of the creek, stepping from the new green willows, was a doe. She was sleek and healthy, and her belly was round, heavy with a new fawn. She stopped at the water's edge and looked at him, her large, dark, liquid eyes unafraid. Tahan did not move. He did not breathe. It was the dream, made real, the sign of the protector. But it was not a warning this time. It was not a command. It was a confirmation. He was no longer the man who needed to be told. He was the guardian. The doe dipped her head, as if in acknowledgement, and then, with a quiet step, she vanished back into the trees. The circle was closed. He walked back to the cabin. Ada was already outside, in her garden. The tall, dead stalks of the old sunflowers stood like sentinels, and at their feet, the new, green shoots of their children were already pushing up through the dark, wet earth. She was hammering a small, hand-carved piece of wood into the soil at the edge of the plot. He came up behind her, his arms sliding around her waist, and he read the words she had burned into the wood. "Sunflower and freedom." "It is perfect," he said. She leaned back against his chest, her hands covered in soil. His body a familiar, strong, warm wall. They stood together and looked at their home, the stone fireplace, the adobe cantina in the distance, a wisp of breakfast smoke rising, the horses grazing by the creek, the wooden cross above their door, the garden, promising new life. Freedom was not a word in a book. It was not a paper in a court. It was this. It was the land. It was the water. It was the breath in their lungs. "We do not belong to each other as property," Ada said, her voice quiet, her head resting back on his shoulder. "No," Tahan said, his gaze on the far-off, blue shape of the medicine mounds. "We chose each other, as free people." He bent his head and kissed the top of her hair. "And that," he said, "is what is eternal." Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please share your city or country in the comments below. Let us connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to our channel, Wild West Tales. Give this video a like and support us further by hitting the hype button. It helps this story reach more listeners. We appreciate every one of you.